Me? Look at me. Look what I'm doing. I'm live streaming horizontally. As horizontal as dot dot dot. You fill in the blank. What is this as horizontal as? What's something very horizontal? That's really what I was trying to figure out when I titled this is what could I say would qualify as the other side of the simile here? What am I really as horizontal as? Something very horizontal. Anyway, I'm kind of waiting for the drugs to kick in. I took my Adderall when I got a really good night's sleep last night. Like 10 hours, probably. A solid 10 hours, which is quite good. It recommends vertical streaming. Hi, Boba Fett. But I've noticed that in the past weeks, I've been vertically streaming and I've garnered no new subs. So my notion here is that perhaps there's not really any reason to vertically stream. And I kind of prefer horizontal streaming when I look at it on the screen. I don't know if that's a good enough reason to stream horizontally, but anyway, it says it's 30 degrees outside right now. Earlier this morning when I got up, like in the middle of the night, I got up and had a cigarette, and it was 20 degrees outside. 20 degrees is pretty cold. Fahrenheit, of course. I don't know what the equivalent in Celsius is. The conversion rate from Fahrenheit to Celsius is a strangely complex equation. You wouldn't think it would be that hard to convert from um, Fahrenheit to Celsius. You think it would be as simple as like multiplying by this, but it's vertical is such a TE business grad term. Huh. I didn't know that. Are you learning in fifth grade? Well, you'd think it would just be multiplied by mya, but it's more complicated than that. So as we're waiting for the drugs to take effect, because I did take an extended release this morning that Ruben gave me, I got a really good night's sleep because it was very intentional. Like, I got a good night's sleep 2 nights ago, and then I got a nap yesterday, and then I got a really good night's sleep last night. I feel almost like fully rested, which is not very common. If Hkrizontal is as, then would Hkrizontal be a logical proposition? Maybe. Maybe, nobody knows. Uh-huh. My Cardano is up. That's good. I bought $500 worth of Cardano yesterday because it dropped all the way down to like 55 or 56 cents. Now my $500 is worth $509, or actually $508.91 now. So, good for me. Yeah. Meow. My logic jokes are gonna search for until I begin to grok that language. Spelling jokes are easier. Hi, Cone Man. Spelling jokes are easier. So I did type somebody last night. He didn't want to publish, but I typed him initially as ISTP. But by the very end of our conversation, I felt myself pretty split 50-50 between ISTP and ESTP, which means he's almost certainly an ESTP. Because the NE polar test, it was an unusual instance where I encountered somebody who, on one polar test, tested quite polar, but on another polar test, it tested not polar. So I think ultimately, based on my tests alone, and not on any of my intuition, that he was an ESTP. It's a little frustrating for me, when my intuition gets the better of me like it did last night. He seemed so much like an introvert that I kind of wasn't even considering extrovert types enough when I typed him. But it's a little frustrating. Like, I should know better or something. I don't know what to say about it. It's like, I've typed so many people. If you'd asked me before the typing session last night, how likely do you think it is for you to be confused between ISTP and ESTP? I would have said very unlikely. Very unlikely, because the polar test is very clear cut for extroverted intuition. But then I didn't really treat it as very clear cut. You know? If you're polar, you should test polar on all the NE tests. And if you don't, then you're not polar. I don't think it is, Coneman, because this gives you an idea how to answer the question being asked. Situation in a typing session, straight to jail. Been watching some typing videos to get ready for being typed. Hope that's not cheating. No, it's not cheating. In fact, Coneman, the whole point of my typing strategy is that it's more or less ungameable. No matter how many times you've watched my typing sessions or even practiced answering the questions, I should be able to see the truth through that. That's what separates what I'm doing from what other people are doing. Now, last night I had a true virgin. He knew a smidge about MBTI, but he had gotten typed because his friend wanted him to get typed by me. His friend is into this channel, you know? So he was a true virgin. He'd not encountered any of my typing stuff at all before. Reader Jen recently typed you an INFP like Spacey. Are you an INFP? I don't know what type you are, show media. Have I ever typed you? For every type, is there a type they cannot game as? Yeah, I would say that's the case. Well, I mean, not for every type. Like, because I don't have a great test for FI polar or FE polar, or SE polar, whenever I type somebody with one of those polars, it's a little less definitive. You don't need to get whereby. I never use whereby anymore. I don't think I even have the whereby accounts. I just use Google Meet now. The cool thing about Google Meet, which I should start probably taking advantage of this reality, is that because Google Meet is linked with YouTube, because they're both Google, you know, you can actually live stream on YouTube directly from Google Meet. I've never done it, but you can. Maybe I have before, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I have the bandwidth really to live stream like that. I can't believe the phone company still hasn't turned on the fiber to our house. They connected it to our house like many months ago. So I already decided well in advance that today was going to be a 60 milligram day. I've taken 30 of, yeah, well, I can assure you, in no uncertain terms, having now spent a fair amount of time with Ruben, there is zero possibility that Ruben is an ENFP. Zero. He is about as FE as you could possibly be. Yeah, you can TE the TI tests, but it would take some doing, right? And the thing is, yes, you can TE the TI tests. However, there are actually something like 356 different syllogism constructions. So it's kind of pretty difficult to to game if I do a thorough job of testing it. And the thing is, like, TI polar, even if you successfully game the explicit TI tests, um, it comes through in conversation too, you know? So it's not just, the other thing is, I generally can tell if someone's answers to TI questions are suspicious in some way. Like, I can read their process of cognition a bit. So if somebody's trying to take a TE'd approach to the TI questions, I can probably tell. Well, I've had plenty of people who meet me on Google Meet on their phones. It's it's how I meet on Google Meet too. So because the reason I mean, that's sometimes my first question, but usually my first question is how many of my typing sessions have you seen before? Because it is informative to me whether you're a virgin, a half virgin, or a slut. You know, like people around here who watch my typing sessions all the time, they're considered sluts. Okay, they're a slightly different approach to typing than a virgin like I typed last night. With him, I knew no matter what I was asking, he had no idea what I was trying to type to test. You know, where's my trash can? You cloggy bitch. This bowl is a real cloggy bitch, let me tell you. I mean, usually that's your first MBTI question a lot of times. Yeah, I'll say, well, actually, what I started with lately is um, do you remember the last time you went on vacation? And can you tell me about that trip? And then can you tell me the most memorable moment from that trip? I think asking people what their most memorable moment from a trip is pretty informative about whether they're NI or SI. And it's another reason why the guy I typed last night is probably ESTP, is because when I asked him that question, he gave me something like a moment. It wasn't a true moment, but it was close to a moment. And that's consistent with 4-5 NISI. You can't, it's harder to distinguish between NISI when they're in the fourth and fifth slot than in any other slot. But it's still the case that an SI conscious person will tend to provide an actual moment from their vacation that they thought was worth was memorable or whatever. Well, like here's where this came from. When we were back from our trip to Hawaii with my dad and Delilah that we did a few years ago, me and Rachel, um, my dad asked us, "What was your favorite moment from the trip?" And interestingly, irrelevantly, but interestingly, uh, my dad and I had exactly the same moment that we enjoyed most, and it was an actual moment. It was like that time when we were driving back from the volcano and we stopped at this super old school McDonald's and sat there and had like coffee and like a hamburger or something. And my dad and I both referenced the exact same moment. Interestingly, the sun was going down. It was beautiful. It was at this cool McDonald's in this cool spot and kind of the hills of the Big Island. And we both, my dad and I both remember that same moment. But Rachel's moment was the changing weather. That's not a moment, right? That's a reality that occurred in Hawaii while she was there the whole time. The weather changed a lot. It was sunny, rainy, cloudy, windy, whatever. We had storms, we had whatever. That's definitely not a moment, right? That's a reality from the trip um, that she that she enjoyed about Hawaii, but it's definitely not a moment. Whereas for my dad and I, it was both a moment. We were at a specific place. It was like the moment might have lasted 15 minutes, but it was a specific stop on a specific trip. It qualified as a moment. When I typed this guy last night and asked him the question, he said, riding motorcycles. So he went on a ski trip, but on part of this ski trip, he rode like dirt bikes in the snow. And that was his favorite moment. Well, that's kind of a moment. It's a lot more of a moment than um, changing weather, but it's less of a moment than that occasion when we sat down in that McDonald's at that one spot between the volcano and the condo on our way back. Jeremiah Fix says, Eric, is it too complicated to track the force thought by considering it as a motivator? I remember some parts of this dream I had not well, but I enjoyed it, for example. Um, I don't know. I don't factor in considerations like if it's a motivator unless I'm asking explicitly value questions. You think it's likely that a moment of satisfaction of a polar function creates a deep impression because of its rarity, so it might indicate polar function is higher up than it is? I know I'm not looking to ask that moment question to determine polar. I'm looking at that. I'm asking that moment question to determine SI front stack or NI front stack. NI front stack people typically don't give a real moment. Value questions are like, do you feel it's more important for you to uphold the value of kindness or fairness? Do you think it's more important for you to uphold the value of reliability or creativity? Do you respect people in the world more if they display consistently a capacity to create impacts or um, a good awareness of social situations? I don't ask a ton of those value questions. In fact, last night I didn't ask any of those value questions. When I ask a question, it's trying to do something specific. So if I'm suspecting that you're SI6, for example, I'm going to ask questions that are designed to reveal to me whether you countervalue SI or not. So then I'll ask some value questions, and I won't just ask directly SI value questions. I'll ask other ones as well to see if one of them stands out as primarily countervalued. I mean, both that I agree that binaries like that face some challenges. I mean, the thing is, you shouldn't ever expect a given approach to do something other than what it's designed to do. If you try to draw a lot of conclusions from a question that's designed to inform you about one thing, then you're going to be all over the place. And man, the cool thing is, I find it hard to answer multiple choice questions, often seeing validity in more than one answer. That's also indicative, right? So it's like if I ask you a this or that question and you say, well, it depends, that's revelatory. You won't say it depends on every question like that. If I say, which do you think is a more important value to uphold? Cruelty or justice? Everyone's going to say justice. Of course, the answer won't be very informative. But the thing is, like the guy I typed last night said, I've only taken multiple choice tests before. You type in an interesting way. You ask a lot of follow-up questions. Well, that's because I'm chasing some specific thing. I'm trying to either confirm that the answer I got is what I think it is, or falsify what I think it is, or whatever, you know. You might answer a question in a way that suggests mia. So then I need to ask some follow-up questions to see if the suggestion of mia is upheld by these other questions that are also informative about that question. In other words, I'm pushing to see if there are contradictions in their answers that invalidate what I concluded from one of their answers conditionally. Okay, now we've watched the cat eat a little bit, even though I don't really enjoy doing that. How about is truth a thinking or feeling function? Someone who is religious might have a spiritual slant on the word truth, while INTP uses the words in terms of logical reasoning. Well, yeah. The thing is, what you're saying there is significant in that if I'm checking for NI and I simply use the word truth as a synonym for NI or something, then I will be led somewhat astray potentially, because truth is such a powerfully positive term connotatively, right? So I do try to adjust for that sometimes. I'll talk about relevance sometimes instead of truth, or I'll avoid using the terms but refer to things in different ways, etc. I mean, the thing to remember about truth, as I've said before, and this is incredibly significant before anybody starts thinking about the term or what it might mean specifically, remember what it does and how we use it. People use the word truth to say, this is something you should agree with. In other words, it's a status we afford to statements that carries the additional meaning, you should agree with this. And it's important to remember also that only statements have truth values, and there are three possible truth values: true, false, or no truth value. When we remember that, then we stop getting so caught up in the idea that truth exists outside of us, you know? I'm not saying it doesn't. Like, the book Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance is really about quality. Does quality exist outside of us? Or is it just a perceiving thing? Like, if I perceive this as a very high quality cup, and I consider it a quality cup sort of particularly in that it fits in my cup, my drink holder. Let's say I have a really well-made knife, and I have a really shitty Chinese-made knife. One of them is clearly better objectively, right? It's not just my opinion. One of them is shoddily made, one of them is well made. And yet, from a duality perspective, it's almost impossible for us to understand how quality can exist outside of us since it's necessarily engaged through human beings. It appears to create some kind of paradox, right? But the paradox is resolved when we understand um, that truth, quality, truth, whatever, is a status we afford to things designed to elicit agreement from somebody else. So, in other words, with a quality knife and a shoddy knife, we're only ever going to explore the issue of quality or truth when we're discussing it as an object of analysis. If it's true that this knife is great and that knife is shoddy, then we're never going to say it's true because nobody's going to dispute it. When we remember that we use language to assign values to things for communicative reasons, then we stop getting so confused about what's going on here, right? It's when we try to remove from communication the reality that it's communicative, that it's communicating something. When we try to treat language as though it's not communicating anything, but rather communicating about something, that's when we get confused. And it's an easy confusion to understand because, of course, to parse language correctly, you have to remove from the equation the agent speaking the language. In other words, you can only parse the object of analysis. You can't parse it based on the person. However, when we step up a frame level and say, well, what is this status we're affirming, namely truth, then that's when we understand and everything becomes clear, right? It's important to remember that implied before every statement we make is the addition of either I believe, it is true that, or both, you know. In other words, the meaning of any statement never changes if you add to the beginning of it, I believe, or it is true that. By making a statement, every time we make a statement, anyone makes a statement, they are asserting that statement is true and that they believe that statement. If they're trying to assert something else, well, like, then that statement is still asserting that thing. So it's like, Joe said, I went to the store, is a statement that's exactly the same as, I believe that Joe said he went to the store, or it is true that. Even if you say, I believe, but I'm not sure that Joe went to the store, it's still a statement that starts with, it is true that I believe, but I'm not sure. You know, it's like you can't avoid that reality, right? So when we remember that truth is linked inherently to statements, and that we're always asserting a statement is true, and that if a statement is unfalsifiable, it has no truth value. So, in other words, a person speaking a statement puts an object on the external metaphysical field. They're always asserting that object is true. But once it becomes an object on the external field, it's subject to scrutiny by others and falsification, regardless of the assertion of the agent speaking it. What if the store moved on to Joe? You can't assume a frame of reference of the store being static. Well, I mean, that's the point is, when you say something, I respond to the object on the external metaphysical field. When I say something, I might say something with multiple implied frames of reference, multiple implied assumptions. And if you want to critique those assumptions, all you need to do is say, your statement is predicated on this assumption, that assumption is false, you know. do the logic, do the work, explain why it's predicated on that, and then you will have, at least for the moment, knocked it down, pending response. That's why arguments are referred to as either standing or not standing. So, like, let's say I read a case, here's my framework, here's my contention 1, contention 2, contention 3. And you go, well, your contention 2 is bullshit because of meow, 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 meow. Then my contention 2 is not standing, assuming your response was on point at all. Even if it's not on point, it's kind of the obligation of the affirmation to say that's not on point, at which point it's standing again, right? So any kind of response really renders an argument not standing for the duration of it going unresponded to. Obviously, as we're talking here, I'm not keeping a flow, of what every argument made, what every response was made, etc. But I'm sort of keeping a flow in my head. And if I do a good job of live streaming, if I do a good job of communicating in general, anytime that anybody has a response to something that I'm saying that might be considered a counter or a rebuttal or a turn or something like that, any kind of answer to, then hopefully I respond to that answer to and treat that answer as though it knocked over my argument until I respond to it, If I don't do that, shame on me. I don't catch every single comment depending on how involved I am in my rant, Okay, so most folks will say something nice unless they're in a shite mood. Well, that's true, Boba Fett, and that's why it's really important when you ask those kind of questions to use two terms that are equally positive or equally negative, so that there's no sort of self-aggrandizing benefit to either choice over the other. How about, is truth a thinking of feeling? I read that, truth being wrapped in moral values. My most me answer to kindness or fairness, I'm not sure I can answer that. I want kindness as a universal front because fairness is not achievable. However, I want individuals to be fair. Well, I mean, fairness is certainly achievable in any given instance. Where do you go to decide how they define truth? I mean, I ask them the question if I want to, how do you define truth? Most people don't have an answer and never really thought about the question before. I should type C.S. Joseph, but that's never going to happen because he will never let it happen. It would just reveal that he's not an ENTP and that he doesn't know what he's doing. Has no possible benefit for him, and his frame is entirely TE. Truth should be that which is both intuitive and replicable. I mean, again, truth isn't something like that. It's a status people afford to things, right? If you say that statement is true, probably somebody's disputing it. When there's analytical truth and there's truth as intention. Well, sure, people use the word to mean something other than a status we afford to statements. I might even say, like, a certain song I hear is very true, which means it's intuitively resonant holistically, but it's not reducibly so. I might still use the term that way. Am I using the term incorrectly? Well, sort of, but it doesn't really matter, right? It's clear that I'm not using it to mean meow when I'm using it to mean meow. I was looking at propositional logic earlier. I wonder if this is the same language used in astrology for the modelites, fixed, cardinal, and mutable. I don't know. You say these words fast, I can't process them that fast. Well, you can always rewind. All three subjectively determined? I don't know what you're asking about. The key points is where you suddenly speed up. How would you delineate between truth and reality? I mean, usually when people talk about reality, they're referencing empirics that we can treat as objects of analysis and independently verify, or that we treat as verified because of methodology compliance. Anytime you generate empirics, methodology basically determines how much weight we should give those empirics. Why? Well, it's just sort of work we've done as a species over the years to understand what kind of empirics are reliable. That's why there are double-blind studies and stuff like that. Can we conclude that all truth is subjective? No, truth is neither subjective nor objective, right? It's a term we use to mean certain things and to accomplish certain things with our communication. It is not, if I say this table is brown, I'm referencing empirics. In this instance, the simplest empirics of all. You can look at it and see that it's brown. For statements like that, there's an axiom implied that we start with, as there is with any kind of logical, verbal reasoning, communicative reasoning. If you break it down all the way, you'll always find an axiom at the bottom that's neither testable nor disputable. Like, the axiom of this table is brown is that we all agree about what the color brown is. If I wanted to be more defensible in my statement, I'd say this table is more brown than it is blue. In that case, even if you don't agree exactly on the color brown, you're going to have to agree with that statement. The axiom assumes that everybody, whatever color they see in their eyes, is in fact, they term brown, just as whatever color I see in my eyes, I term brown, and that's not going to change over time. So even if what they see when they look at this table is what I would term green, they're going to call it brown. And and the axiom will test out as correct in all instances in which somebody's not dissembling. You could always dissemble and say, well, you don't know for sure that everybody sees that as brown, blah, blah, blah. That's what makes it an axiom, right? You can dissemble about it, but there's no good reason to. That shoddy knife might work for someone somewhere, it'd be just the thing too. Well, that's the thing about a shoddy knife, right? A shoddily made knife. It can do the job. It can never do the job better than a well-made knife. Granted, if the shoddy knife is super sharp and the well-made knife is super dull, it might momentarily do the job better. But in that case, you're sort of dissembling again. Let's assume both knives are equally well cared for. I don't owe you $500. Truth is simply what is. Well, remember, truth is a status we afford to statements. When you remember that as the beginning, then you won't run afoul of kind of these metaphorical understandings. I'd like to say the barn door is already open, so what can we do about the why? I mean, I don't really distinguish much between belief and conviction. I understand that my moral engagements with the world often are not subject to communicative parsing necessarily. So, even though we have a rifle and we went out into the woods to shoot it, I knew for sure that even if I saw like a rabbit or something, I wasn't going to try to shoot it. And I knew this because I knew that it would make me feel bad emotionally. I didn't need to discuss the issue with myself at all because it's purely subjective, right? Like, I know from experience that if I hurt something, I'm going to feel really bad with my FI, that it's going to haunt me. So, you might consider that a moral thing, or you might not. I'm not sure. But for me, it's a sort of choice making that in some way for me links to good or bad. It's not linked to communicative stuff at all. The answer to what is truth cannot be TI or NI, but how you answer the question, what is truth, may be revelatory to some extent of how you understand the term. If you answer the question, what is truth, with that which withstands scrutiny is validated or can't be falsified, or can be falsified but isn't, then that's a very TI answer to the question, right? If you say truth is reality, truth is what is, that's not a very informative answer to the question. You can't really determine anything from that answer. That's why I don't usually ask the question, how do you define truth? Because people don't have typically very good definitions of it, or have never really thought about the question. What if the storm moves? Oh, I already got that one. Paint fades. I've heard that statement based on that. Red was the color that was thought to be so vivid as to last through the fading process longer. Well, the thing is, I'm not telling you that this table will be brown on an infinite time frame, because I'm not communicating on an infinite time frame. I'm saying right now and for the foreseeable future, without any dramatic changes to the physical space, this table qualifies as more brown than blue. Get away from me. Do not scratch me like that. No. Truth is based on reality, and reality is based on perception. Well, I mean, it's important to remember, Cone Man, if I say, I have a hat and I have a light jacket, then whether or not that statement is true, it is determined by the and, okay? So we can reference empirics. In other words, the simplest kind of empirics, again, you can see that I have a hat and you can see that I have a light jacket. But what determines whether the statement is true or not is actually the statement connected. Because if I said, I have a hat but not a light jacket, then I've changed the statement connected from and to but not, to but and not. Well, it's and again, but not. I added a not. That changes the truth value of the statement. What you're saying is the referent that we look at determines whether the statement's true or not. But that's absolutely not the case, right? The referent that determines whether the statement is true or not is the statement connective. Now, not every statement has a connective. So some statements without a connective, that's determined exclusively by a single point of empirics. The thing to remember about that, though, is we almost never have any reason to actually assert the truth of a single point of empirics. If we're talking about a single point of empirics, it's never going to be in dispute. And that's why we always need to remember that discussions of truth, understandings of truth, are communicative acts for communicative purposes, okay? Well, when we remember that, we stop getting so fixated on the empirical data that we may or may not reference. And you'll note that whether or not we make statements about objective data or subjective data determines whether the truth of the statement we're making is verifiable or falsifiable. So if I say I like cheese and I like bacon, everyone's going to just afford that statement the value of true. They're not going to challenge it at all because I'm merely talking about subjective data. You can't access directly what I like. You can't independently scrutinize what I like. Because even if I don't eat those things, I'm just claiming that I like them, not that I eat them. So because I'm referencing purely subjective data, the truth value of that statement is never going to be disputed because nobody has grounds to dispute it, right? I'm just referencing subjective data. So nevertheless, you'd have to agree that statement's true, or state that I'm purposefully lying for some reason about it and have some justification for that. So when you say truth is reality, well, sometimes what I'm saying, remember, we start with what you're saying, not with anything else. Sometimes what I'm saying is referencing stuff you can't access. And in that case, we treat truth as subjective. In other words, it's whatever I say. In instances where we're referring to pieces of objective data, you might say that my statement is inconsistent with the objective data that it references, right? In other words, that my analysis, my communication about the objective data is communicating something that doesn't validate objectively. So when we remember to put the agent first, then we stop saying things like truth is based on reality and reality is based on perception. And we say things instead like people communicate statements about different kinds of data. When they communicate statements about objective data, the reason it's objective data and what makes it objective data is that we can analyze that data independently and check their communication act against what we perceive about that objective data. And we can make statements about that objective data that other people can independently verify or falsify, right? So you could think of it kind of like blockchain, a blockchain approach to truth. What you're looking for is not absolute consensus along the blockchain regarding a point in question if the data is objective. This is only relevant if we're talking about objective data. You're looking for a supermajority, beyond a supermajority even. You're looking for almost consensus. That's the only thing you're ever going to get, because to pretend you could always get pure consensus on any given thing is to suggest that it's impossible for individuals to attempt fraud, deceit, or just make mistakes. And that is possible. So that's probably the best analogy for how we determine what's legitimate or not as statements. Well, scientific truths aim for pure objectivity. A better way to put this is when scientists attempt to produce empirics, they need to follow certain methodology protocols if those empirics are to be trusted. Now, that's communicating correctly about the subject. Scientific truths are for acquiring grants to fund their studies to justify a wasted career in academia. Well, money's probably the most correct about this. I may be losing you, Boba Fett, but there's no word gobble here. Nobody could ever accuse me of word salad. When I say things, I mean things. And very few people can say that, but I definitely can. I mean, you can challenge them, but you have to challenge statements you make about your likes by saying that you're lying, right? Okay. If you say, I like meh and I like meh, the only way I can challenge it is by saying that you're lying, since you're the only one who has access to the subjective data. If I've got no reason to justify the claim that you're lying, it's probably ill-advised for me to make the claim, right? Good. I'm glad I'm making sense. Well, you won't hear any of this in an introductory philosophy course either, Cone Man. Unfortunately, introductory philosophy courses sort of present to you the history of wrongness, the history of people failing to understand what I'm articulating now. I didn't fully understand this at all until I understood cognitive functions. It's almost impossible to understand it. When you understand cognitive functions, you realize that every question goes back to ultimately what is that this is an artifact of the attention of an individual, and each other individual is going to engage with this artifact if they do via their own attentional matrix. When we remember that sort of thing, then all these questions and answers become very clear and straightforward. And like the big cosmological questions, accepting why are we here, where did we come from, those kind of questions are all answered by cognitive functions. Questions about what is truth, questions, those things are questions about aesthetics, questions that are more important, like why are we in conflict? Why can't we see eye to eye about when both parties think the answer seems so clear and obvious? Questions like what sort of attention is appropriate for this matter? Questions like how can we get the world to people at large to understand themselves as products of their deficits rather than as something else. If we sort of started everyone's life with a conversation that said, it started with, to be human is to be shitty at certain things. And these are the things that you're inherently shitty at. We, as a universe and a world of people, are not going to ontologically assault you for being shitty at things you're inherently shitty at. Don't bother trying to be good at them, and don't expect yourself to be good at them. When somebody else shames you for being bad at them, tell them, this is who I am, you're just as shitty at, something else, whatever it might be. So, I stay out of your lane, you stay out of mine, motherfucker. If we taught every child that from the outset, that here is who you are not, and that's okay, and later only, after we drilled into every child, here's what you should not expect yourself to be good at. You can still try if you want to, but know that it's okay that you suck at these things. You will always suck at them, and that's okay. We should start by telling everybody that. Once we figure out everybody's type, we start by saying, here's how you suck. And then, all of a sudden, if everybody's communicating like that, then nobody's ontologically assaulting anybody anymore, right? The only kind of ontological assault that could happen in that instance wouldn't be ontological assault. It would be pointing out somebody's bad driving. If you're driving an RV, don't treat it like you're riding a crotch rocket. You'll crash. If you're riding a crotch rocket, don't try to tow a U-Haul. You're gonna crash. And in that instance, the world gets positioned correctly, right? If somebody's asking you to tow a U-Haul, you simply say, do you not see that I'm riding a crotch rocket? I don't tow U-Hauls. Asking me to do so is insane. What the fuck's wrong with you? Instead of this reality where I need you to navigate these windy mountain roads at maximum speed and tow a U-Haul. I need you to be able to do both or else you're somehow inadequate. That's the status quo. There's something wrong with you because you can't both tow a U-Haul and drive windy mountain roads at high speeds. They expect you to be able to change between motorcycle and four-wheel drive truck or something at will. Of course, nobody can change between those things. They are what they are and not something else. There are some types who are going to bristle at this reality more than other types, right? So, probably the more subjective and sensory you are, the more you're going to object to this on one or more grounds. ESTJs think everything can be everything. You know, don't tell me this can't both be a philosophy paper and a love story. Well, it can. You can mush things together willy-nilly, but it's not a good idea. In my opinion, people should allow things to be what they are and not try to force them to be something else. I don't like Swiss Army knives, right? Give me a knife, give me a corkscrew, give me a bottle opener, give me a can opener. You don't need to combine them all into one thing. Okay, I have no reason to have a combined into a one thing. Anytime you combine everything into one thing, then it's always a shittier version of each of those things independently. I mean, I think, this idea that we could always make it also something else and that would be better is very anti-polar. I think the reason it's anti-polar in part is because it's such an SI frame of reference, right? It's like, I know that that every time I turn on this light, I also turn on this light. So I'll make this one light switch, turn them both on. That's a good TESI thing, but it's predicated on your particular relationship with the lights, right? So that's what makes it anti-polar. Or like, I envision a reality where during the summer, we don't have to turn the air conditioning on or use the central air or whatever. I envision a reality in which each person in this house has increased capacity to determine their own temperature by adjusting all the fans in each room. Well, yes, it allows you to do more different things with the climate and stuff in your space, but the ceiling fan fixtures don't go with the house at all. The ceilings are too low to even have them. I actually hit my head into the little strings that hang down, even though they don't hang down very far. And every time I reach up, I run the risk of hitting the fan blade. The house has a central fan in the foyer to fan things, and it's got a fan setting on the central air conditioning, and it's got air conditioning. Why do we need fucking ceiling fans in every room? Maybe if you have every room always occupied every time you come here, it makes more sense. But, it's like, even if we have every room occupied and it's hot, we're probably more well suited to turn the air conditioner down lower and or close some of the vents downstairs because obviously heat rises. There are better solutions already implicit in the design of the house. You can close and open the central vents easily enough. It's a terrible idea. It's a terrible idea to put those fans in because only a fraction of the time during the year are most of the fans going to be used. And even then, there are better solutions that don't include and don't involve changing all the fucking fixtures in these horrible ceiling fan fixtures, right? So it's anti-polar, which means it worked beautifully for those people. And it doesn't work at all for me. It doesn't universalize at all. It's not a good idea universally. It's just a good idea for these stupid people who have their stupid anti-polar priorities. Because I'm convinced the people we bought this house from were a couple that was an ESTJ and an ESFJ. The ESFJ insanely and stupidly vomited crucifixes all over the wall across the top hallway with these horrible little nails that don't really nail into the wall because it's metal. It was just like, oh God, who, why, who, when, what were you fucking thinking? How many crucifixes do you need on the wall? Antipolar. I don't just need one I want one crucifix, but I want a crucifix up. Okay, if I really want a crucifix up, I'll put a big crucifix up. No, I'm gonna put like 50 crucifixes on the wall in case crucifixes 1 through 49 don't convey the message. Antipolar, right? I'm gonna put a little sign on the pantry door that says pantry. Why? Because you can't remember where the pantry is? Obviously, we took that sign down. We took it down and took it outside to shot BB guns at it, actually, which was turned out to be a bad idea because it was like made out of metal or something because the BBs ricocheted off it. We eventually stopped doing that. Me and Cameron and Rachel shot BB guns at it. Cameron's got a cool pump action BB gun. Not when you're trying to be a lean beef patty. Am I a lean beef patty? It's funny, I was thinking before I started streaming about this thing that happened in China one time when I was there, and I was talking to this other debate coach who was working in China for some other debate program. I don't remember what it was, but I was whining about this or that or the other thing. And he's like, what are you whining about, man? Look at yourself. You're tall, you're thin. You're opening debate schools in China. You've got a family. You are obscenely successful as a coach. You win all the time. What are you possibly complaining about? This guy was kind of short and chubby, and that was really the first time I ever thought about the fact that like being tall and thin was some kind of an advantage. I'd never really thought about it before that at all. That guy really like opened my eyes and was like, oh shit. I'm just completely oblivious to other people's lives. I'm so self-absorbed. I'm just completely oblivious as I'm talking. And it's like I could be complaining to a homeless person about the size of my home, you know? That's bipolar in a nutshell. I mean, that instance, I don't remember what I was even whining about, but he really opened my eyes. And it is the case. I was thinking about this a bit this morning too, that I really was obscenely successful as a coach. I can't believe how much my kids won. We were a real fucking juggernaut, I tell you. And that was true where I'm talking about my kids at Rebay I was coaching, or the kids at Kudas I was coaching, or kids at Autonomy I was coaching. We just won and won and won and won and won. I was an excellent debate coach. You know, it takes multiple skills to be an excellent debate coach. You have to be able to be the most novel and creative in terms of your argumentation, and also the most correct, because almost always that which validates has a gentler or more friendly rhetorical slope than that which falsifies, you know? In other words, it's always harder to win an argument with bullshit than it is with the truth. But that's predicated on some shared frame of reference, right? Like, it's very difficult for me to win an argument about cognitive functions or type because whoever I'm talking to has a totally different understanding of what I'm saying than I do, you know? There's not consensus about the meaning of the terms. Good morning, Lou. Good morning. Hello to you. I like broccoli. I think broccoli is a good vegetable. I like asparagus. I even like green beans on occasion. Certainly, I like snow peas. Who doesn't like snow peas? Snow peas are a good vegetable. So, not all vegetables are bad. Carrots, I mean, I'll eat them. I'm not going to eat them raw. I don't have enough teeth. But I'll eat them if they're cooked. Now, here's something I used to hate and I could not eat for a long time, but I absolutely would not touch. Because the way my parents made them, they always stank like poop. But I've since had them many times where they're delicious. Brussels sprouts. Surprisingly, if you cook Brussels sprouts correctly, they can be quite delicious. I know. They're like little stinky cabbages, right? Well, only if you steam them. There's some restaurants I've been to where they cook them somehow where they're not like stinky little cabbages, they're delicious. So I don't know what the trick is, but it's not inconceivable that you could get some good Brussels sprouts. Corn's fine. The problem with corn, of course, and it's not really a big problem, is that it shows up so much in your poop. And you have to look at gross corn poop. You only eat the same meal every day. You eat nothing but a cup of noodles. Here are the worst vegetables. The very top of the list, probably, is squash. Nobody should ever want to eat squash for any reason. Right beneath squash, because really a kind of squash, is zucchini. Zucchini is terrible. Don't ever eat it. Next on the list, eggplant. Don't ever eat eggplant. Eggplant is gross. Let's see, number 4 on the list of terrible vegetables. Um, oh, well, kale, obviously. Kale is horrible. Nobody should ever eat it. Bok choy, terrible. Swiss chard, terrible. All of those things are terrible. So, for example, in this instance, Ke and Lou are both wrong in their subjectivities, okay? They have told a lie when they say that squashes are yummy. Because really, we all know and should all agree that squash is disgusting. This is where it's nice to have this subjective conversation because it demonstrates what I'm saying about truth, right? Um, Obviously, squashes aren't objectively good or bad, but people can say the truth about their subjective opinions about them. Okay, well, Ke, I don't know what's wrong with you. I don't know what's wrong with you. You love eggplant and zucchini. Maybe your taste buds are broken. Maybe you were born without food correctness. I don't know. Quail is like a pigeon. I'm not sure I've ever eaten a quail before. I have eaten plenty of times Cornish game hen, but one time I ordered it and they sent out some gay men from Cornwall. And then I was like, that's not what I want. I want that little teeny bird. And then the waiter's like, oh, Cornish game hen. I'm sorry, I thought you said Cornish gay men. Yeah. So I went ahead and ate the gay man. I don't like cilantro. I didn't like cilantro until I was a full ass adult plus a dozen years or so. I've heard that for a lot of people. Apparently, there's a certain gene you have. Some people, it makes cilantro taste like soap. Um, I've never experienced that, so I apparently don't have that gene. I never had an objection to cilantro. I always kind of liked it, but I wasn't like a huge like enthusiast. Like, put more cilantro in this, you know. I'll tell you what my favorite vegetable is: parsley. When I was a kid, they used to garnish your plate at the restaurant with a sprig of parsley. I just eat the parsley, ask for more parsley, and leave the rest of the food. Ke, are you really fun and likable? Are you? You seem pretty combative around here. I find that fun and likable, but From experience, I can tell you, being an ENTP myself, a lot of people don't find combativeness that likable. A good baba ganoush and pita, some lamb kebabs. Lamb is gross, okay? Let's all agree with that. Lamb is for people who don't have cows and pigs. Um, Hummus I like. Tahini, I'm not really sure what that is. Salad is fine if it's got like Roquefort dressing on it. You know, you're at a cool old fancy restaurant when they offer Roquefort as one of their dressing choices. Baba Ganoush. Baba Ganoush has too silly a name to be good. I don't know what it is, but if it wants to actually make my list of good foods, it needs to have a less silly name. Oh, yes, your daddy loves you. Yes, he does. He loves you with his emotion heart. Do you know that I have an emotion heart? It's called my feelings. I use my feelings to love my cat. The J and P being flipped as an MBTI thing, Socionics fixed it. So that's why Socionics uses those three-letter codes, but they also, if you use the four-letter term, they'll put the J or P in small letters. So I'm an ENT small p, but an INTP would be called an INT small j. It's how they distinguish the fact that they're using Socionics version of MBTI versus MBTI version of MBTI. I have found my feelings. Oh, yes. And my heart is filled with love. Yes, it is. Oh, my heart is filled with so much love for my kitty. Yes, because she's such a wonderful lady. Oh, yes. Such a wonderful kitty. You make me want to play the song Wonderful Kitty. That's how wonderful you are. Wonderful, wonderful kitty. Having wonderful times. Always cleaning yourself. Making sure you got clean lines. Wonderful, wonderful kitty. Such a fabulous soft friend. Now it's wonderful kitty petting time again. That's what it's about, this song. That song was about this cat. I meant to say. Just let me pet you. Don't walk away. It's petting time. Hooray! Yes, it is. It's petting time. So you see, even bipolar people can be emotionally engaged with a kitty cat. I love cuddling the kitties too. You know, Rachel really loves cuddling the kitties too. I think loving cuddling the kitties is probably a universal thing. I don't think you have to have FI in any particular spot to love the kitties. Kitties are so lovable. Yes, they are so lovable. Well, I mean, show media, that doesn't mean you're an INFP. That could well just mean you're a failure. Like most of us here. You know, that's one thing about talking with Spanish people. You will never get judged in talking with Spanish people for being a failure in life. Even though I've had a ridiculous amount of success in life, actually, I don't feel like a success in life. I feel like a big failure. So, um, maybe I set the standard too high for myself, or maybe I just don't have an absolute value for SI, so what I've done before doesn't seem to matter very much to me. Oh, kitty. I'm very future oriented. It's like the reason I feel like a failure is I don't feel at the moment like I'm working towards any particular future. I'm just sort of trying to figure out what I want to do, etc. Besides petting the kitty. Petting the kitty is an absolute value. Yes, it is. Oh, yes. My love for you is an absolute value. Yes, it is. I love you. seems much less open-minded than me? Well, it's because he's not trying to type people defensively. If you question whether he's got your type right, he's going to point to holistic, intuitively derived conclusions like the one show media just articulated. That's not a good way to type people because it doesn't afford them any way to check your answers and verify that what you're saying is correct. It doesn't give them any way to push back, right? If I'm typing you and my typing of you is meaningful, then you should have some way to push back on it. If every pushback is met with, well, my intuition says, then the whole thing is just like you trust this person's intuition. And in that case, it's no different than an astrology reading, right? Or a tarot reading. I do trust Lou's intuition. I've had multiple tarot readings from her, which have been like spooky, right on the money. She also knows me and Rachel well enough that her intuition informs her accordingly. So it allows her to individuate our tarot readings so that they really apply to us. Like we had a tarot reading before our wedding and it was crazy accurate. And Lou did a spectacular job with it. I was really impressed. But the thing is, in that instance, I know what I'm doing, right? I'm trusting her intuition. I'm not expecting her to make a defensible case of any sort. So the problem people are going to have with typologists, other than me in general, is that they're going to attempt to provide you a type, but defend it with my intuition says. They may phrase that in many different ways, but ultimately what they're saying is my intuition says. And again, like last night, I came across a problem where my intuition said ISTP. My testing was more consistent with ESTP. I should have told them I'm going with ESTP after thinking about this a bit, but instead I ended it with kind of like, well, I'm going with ISTP, but you could be an ESTP. So, I have a little bit of regret about that. I wish I did a full hour plus, like a little bit more than a full hour. It wasn't like I was rushing it or anything. But I'm not perfect. I make some mistakes. And that was just my intuition getting with me. I basically wasn't even considering the possibility that he was an extrovert because his affect was so introverted. And his answers were pretty short, like an ISTP's would be. My initial thought going in was ISTP, ISFP maybe. And I didn't get a lot of stuff that explicitly contradicted it, but I should have done more work on the possibility of an extrovert rather than just letting my intuition conscribe the range of my typing in the way that it did. Granted, within an hour, the range of my typing is always going to be somewhat conscribed. I can't spend 30 minutes on every function that I have tests for, But if I do it right at the beginning, I start with everything as a possibility and work my way down to just these as possibilities. I didn't, it'd probably help if I had like a list of them in front of me and crossed them off one at a time and made a note as to why. The guy didn't publish, this guy I typed last night. Every woman has a portable hole. Well, men's holes are portable as well. My inner Sisyphus is happy. You are an absurdist. Well, basically you can define hole as anything I can put my penis in. Defining whole is a difficult is a difficult term to define, right? What's a whole? I mean, it's a it's a spot where a given thing isn't. I wonder how whole is defined by the dictionary. That's a tricky word to define, right? What's a whole? Oh, you want a donut right now? I might have a donut right now. I have donuts in the kitchen. They're extremely gooey, uh, glazed donuts. They're like ultra goo. So it's a lovely snowy day outside today. It's nice to get a little snow, you know. I don't want anything like last year's experience where we got just hammered with massive snowfall that did things like broke the glass table on the deck because I was dumb. It didn't even occur to me that 5 feet of piled up snow on the glass table that used to be out here on the deck was going to break the table. That's called being super dumb. But this is a very manageable amount of snow. A couple inches. A little bit on the driveway, but I don't need to put chains on or anything. I could just get up the driveway. Usually enough. With this little amount of snow on the driveway. But it does make everything look picturesque, you know? And this is snow. It's pretty crunchy. It melted pretty well during the day yesterday and then froze last night again. This would be really kind of ideal skiing snow. It's not ice, but it's not powder. If this, like a Mammoth right now, I'm sure you've got that classic ideal that they call Sierra cement. Get multiple feet of snow packed down. No moguls yet because it hasn't been skied on enough. Neither ice nor powder is just perfect conditions. I bet the conditions of Mammoth right now are absolutely fucking perfect. I would love to go skiing right now. But I'm not going to. Probably hurt myself anyway. It's like my body knows very well how to ski. I got on skis right now. On slope, I'd have no problem skiing, but the muscles I use are completely atrophied for skiing, right? So obviously every time I do go skiing or have gone skiing in the last 20 years or so, I end up the next day super sore. Well, now I'm in my 50s, so who knows how I would handle it. But I will point out that on December 28th, there was at Mavericks what they call the swell of the decade. Mavericks, for those who don't know, is a famous surf spot here in California. It's north of Santa Cruz, between Santa Cruz and Half Moon Bay. For like 20 years, this group of like 3 guys surfed it all by themselves. Nobody knew about the spot. To get there, you have to hike 2 miles in from the highway. You still do. When I went to Santa Cruz, the people who had been surfing that spot by themselves for decades finally said, okay, we're going to tell people about it. And now it's one of the biggest named surf spots in the world. So when I was in college, it was just getting out the news that there was this place called Mavericks. And I surfed some in college, but I was not nearly a good enough surfer to surf big waves. Anyway, on December 28th of this year, Mavericks had a massive swell, 30 to 40 foot waves. And surfers from all around the world due to surf forecasting arrived. Some of the best surfers in the world arrived. And there's a bunch of videos up, Mavericks highlights from December 28th. And what people are calling the wave of the year, the ride of the year, was actually accomplished by this guy who's 54 years old. So, and I watched it. It's crazy. It's like he gets on it way earlier than normally you get on big waves at Mavericks, and he rides it all the way across, and it's massive. So, he's 54 and he's still doing that. But he's probably been surfing the whole time. If I were to go skiing right now, because I would never go surfing because I'm not a good surfer, but if I were to go skiing right now, there'd be a genuine chance of me like straining a muscle, tearing a muscle, something like that, because my body knows how to ski, but it doesn't have the requisite muscle development to do it well. And sure, I'd try to take it. I definitely would take it easy, like go on only intermediate slopes, probably, just because you have to have strong legs for advanced slopes to be fun. Your mom's tits. My mom's tits. So anyway, I like to watch those kind of videos when there's a huge swell someplace. Like you get 40, 50-foot waves or whatever, and those crazy fuckers get towed out on jet skis and surf them. I love to watch videos of that. Sorry, Capio. Didn't mean to bump into you. I love you. I'm glad you're still here. Oh, now you're leaving. Okay, goodbye. Uncle Fatty. Hi, Uncle Fatty. Silly two plankers. Oh, you're a snowboarder? I've never attempted snowboarding. When I was a kid, snowboarding didn't didn't exist. There was no snowboarding. It was just skiing. Now, snowboarding is at least as popular as skiing, maybe even more popular. But I know for sure I would not be able to do it because the only reason I can ski well, because I'm bad at all those things, those balance things like skateboarding, surfing, skimboarding, whatever. I'm bad at all those things. But the only reason I can surf well is because uh, my parents, ski well, is because my parents put me on skis when I was very small, and I skied a lot when I was a little kid. So it's like, it got imprinted into my muscle memory how to do it. Go big or go home. Huge surf in SoCal the past few days. Yeah, I apparently had to rescue a bunch of people in like San Diego. So Southern California normally isn't hit by big swells very much. The biggest waves you're going to get in SoCal are usually, on any normal day, it'll be like 2 to 3 feet, but you might get a big swell hit 10 to 12 feet. I think the waves in SoCal were like 20 feet in this most recent swell. And they had to rescue a bunch of people because unlike Mavericks, the only people out there are people who really know what they're doing, who have jet skis to tow them and stuff. But in the 20-foot range, people will go attempt it who maybe aren't capable. Like, the day that Steamers was big, I went out on the longboard when I was in college. I don't know how big it was, probably somewhere in the 10 to 20-foot range. And on my first attempt to ride the wave, I got hammered and broke the longboard. I had to swim the swim of shame all the way around the points of where you can get out. And everybody in the house was so mad at me because I broke the house longboard. I stood up for like half a second and just got BAM! Just hammered by this big wave of steamers. And just like in the washing machine, tumbled all around, and I pop up and the boards and split in half. USA love their guns. I do have a rifle, but I would not say that I love it. It's a cool rifle. It's a cool bolt action rifle. You can put a clip in there so you could just go like, I don't know. That's not semi-automatic. It's just one shot at a time, but you don't have to load the bullets one at a time. Right. I had the most fun surfing actually down around the point where the swim of shame is. There's this beach where these gentle little waves crash that's over off to the side of steamers. And when I enjoyed surfing, and I surfed quite a bit for some years or two in college, I'd go out early in the morning and try to catch those little teeny waves, 2 to 3, 4-foot waves at most. Those I could stand up on sometimes. I always felt like clear after I surfed, tired, fulfilled in some way. I need to get back to exercising. Exercising is pretty important. Shit's going off. Finally, we got some freshies in northern Idaho. Still need 6 more feet, but I'll take it. Yeah, if I were a surfer, I'd be really excited about the waves right now, and I'm sure I'd be making the approximately 3 hour drive from here to Mavericks. But I'm not that into surf forecasting and stuff. If we're supposed to get another huge swell coming in too, but it would be super fun and interesting to drive to Mavericks, make the 2 mile hike, stand on the cliffs and watch people surf those massive waves, get some footage and stuff. There was somebody at that most recent Mavericks swell that filmed it with a drone, and they got some great fucking footage. It's incredible. Uh, it seems to me that flying a drone would be difficult, but I guess people who know how to do it know how to do it. You know, Shooter is a great film. I've never seen it, but thank you for the advice. I am always looking for cool things to uh, to watch. Are these the largest waves ever surfed? Nazari 2020. Is that Portugal? Is that where Nazari is? Wow. Wow. That's crazy. Wow. It's like it you know, when you watch these waves, it's kind of crazy to see them. So yeah, this is in Portugal. I've seen this. I don't know if I've seen this exact video before, but I've seen a video like it, at least. And Nazari's crazy. When Nazari goes off, you get crazy ass waves like this shit. You know, look at it. That one's not that big. That one's pretty massive. I don't know what this has to do with the Olympics. I guess surfing's an event in the Olympics now. This is fucking ridiculous, right? Like, can you imagine being that guy on that wave, surfing this massive fucking thing? If he crashes, he's gonna get just hammered beyond comprehension. Like, the wave I got hammered by was probably at most a quarter as big as that wave. And it still hammered me and broke my surfboard. So, um, somebody might ride 100-foot waves. They're saying. I don't know. I'd have to Google the question, "What's the biggest wave ever surfed?" I'm sure there's an answer to it. Let's see what it says. Ten biggest waves ever surfed. Sebastian Studner from Germany surfed at Nazari an 86-foot wave. He set the record on a cold winter day at Nazari at a wave measured 86 feet. Number 2 is 80 feet by Rodrigo Coxa from Brazil. Number 3 is 78 feet by Garrett McNamara from Hawaii. He was the first one to attempt a ride at Nazari. Mike Parsons, Quartz Bank, United States, 77 feet. Most big waves are fickle, and some only appear a few times a year or less. Quartz Bank, where California surfer Mike Parsons surfed a 77-foot wave in 2008, one of those rare waves. Known as the Phantom Wave of California, is located about 100 miles off the coast of San Diego. It's just about as dangerous to get there as it is to surf it due to tricky waters and shallowly submerged islands hidden in the ocean. Huh. Interesting. So he had to go way out to sea to get that wave. Maya Gabeira, Brazil, 73.5 feet in Nazari. So this is a lady who got this. No one knows the dangers of this better than Red Bull athlete Maya Gabeira, who nearly died surfing Nazari. Her triumphant recovery and incredible achievement of surfing a 73-foot wave in 2020 at the same place she almost lost her life 7 years earlier was documented in Red Bull's Return to Nazari. The wave she fell on was so big it would have been a world record then and is still one of the top 5 biggest waves surfed today. Well, good for her. Francisco Porchella, 73 feet. No stranger to scary wipeouts and back-breaking injuries, Francisco persisted and returned to surf massive moving walls of water on another day. Even after his record-breaking wave, he continues to challenge himself at Nazari and puts his life in danger in search of the indescribable thrill. Yuri Soledade, Hawaii, at Jaws in Maui, Hawaii, 71 feet. And then that German guy, Sebastian Strudner, also got a 71-foot wave in 2014. Then Justine Dupont from France, another lady, got wave number 9. That's 70.5 feet. Number 10, Pete Cabrina, Hawaii, at Jaws, 70 feet. Big wave surfing is not only the most death-defying discipline within surfing, but it attracts some of the most resilient personalities. Most big wave surfers are not regular competitors at top surfing contests. It is also one of the only disciplines where women compete alongside men for the same awards and where women have made a mark on the top of the rankings. Well, good for them. Good for them and their vaginas. I'm proud of them. Hi, Carlos Paeva. Charlie Don't Surf gets the film. I have no idea what film that is. There's only so much room at the table, Gunny. So are you in or are you out? Anna Nicole married for love. Good for him, Nicole. I'm so proud of her. Thanks. Now I'm planning on doing some barbell curls. Good for you. Shooter, Bob Lee Swagger, Mark Wahlberg. Huh. I'll have to check it out. I wonder what streaming service it's on. And you've got Marlon Brando as an INFP. I have no idea what type Marlon Brando is. Meow. I hear you meowing. I do. And I love you. And I think you're a special man. This cat is such a pain in the ass. Oh, it was Jeffrey's mom, of course. Got my instructions. You must obey big corporations. That's my central message here. The bigger the corporation, the more you must obey. Okay, it's time to pull some bowls. Then I'm going to run through the few songs that I might play tonight at the open mic. I'm really excited about the open mic. It's been years since I've done an open mic. I have, I think, realistic expectation that I'll be quite well received. It's exciting to me because I'll be playing my songs for, or at least one of my songs for, I'll definitely record it. We'll definitely record it. I'll be playing at least one of my songs for people who've never heard it before. Maybe 2, maybe even as many as 3, you know? One of the great things about open mic is I can expect with a high degree of certainty that I will follow the rule of leave them wanting more, right? if you have the more time you have to play, the more you risk sort of losing your captivating quality. If you only have one or two or three songs to play, well, if I have three songs to play, I know that I'll probably end with a cover of White Boy. That's definitely going to be well received because it's such a upbeat popping song, you know. Uh, but regardless, I know that when I'm performing well, my best stuff, that I definitely stand out. You know, other people may be as good as guitarists, other people may be as good as singers, um, but I never encounter others who are as good as songwriters or who have as much of the complete package as I do playing at an open mic, you know? So I'm looking forward to it because I know from experience that I it'll hit. Your best stuff. Hostek, for a while you referred to some donkey project as your best stuff. I forget which donkey, if it was a donkey. I have no idea what you're talking about. I have zero concept of what you could possibly be referring to. What do you want? You want me to go watch you eat some more? Let me pull another bowl and I'll go watch you eat. Why this cat's named Trouble? He's just nothing but trouble. Although I will say I'm very proud of him for getting accustomed somewhat to Ruben and Acacia. He's willing to come in here while they're in the room even now, which is real progress. Oh, you're talking about Dolphin Boy. That is an example of my absolute finest work. And also something that not very many people probably appreciate as much as I do. Proof that I might think other people are wrong about what I make sometimes. You know, in general, when I'm doing humor stuff, I don't think really it's possible for other people to be wrong. If it's genuinely funny and interesting and good, then they're going to enjoy it. I mean, you're never going to get hit with every single person, but you can tell what pops because it evokes response. However, there are occasional things that don't hit, but that I think are great anyway. You know, like Dr. Lionel Sprinting Wolf Kazaquo. Dr. Lionel Sprinting Wolf Kazaquo, that video, is one of the best videos I've ever made. But it only has like 100 views or something. I think it's fantastic. It needs needs to be cut a little bit at the end. I may do that and then re-upload it even. It's possible. Okay, I'm sitting here in the kitchen. You meowed and meowed for me to come in here. Now, what do you want? You don't want to eat. You don't want to go outside. What do you want? Why am I in here? You just wanted me to come sit in here with you or what? Come on. You're going to eat. Look, I'm not your bitch. Okay? You need to understand that. Carl seems to think I'm his bitch. And he's like, yes, you are. See what's happening now? You are my bitch. Okay, Trouble, but you don't need to rub it in so much. Oh, yes. What an important kitty, man. What a valued contribution to the family. Oh, yes. Daddy loves you even though you're so much trouble. You are trouble as trouble can be. You're double the trouble and half the fun. He scratched me last night for absolutely no reason. Like, I didn't even pet him on purpose, I think. I think I just accidentally touched him with my hand while he was sleeping, and he just like clawed me instantly right above my watch. It got stuck in my skin. Like, ow, motherfucker, stop. And then he got his claw out, and I said, ow, and I scratched the spot. And then I went back to sleep. He did seem apologetic afterwards, like I caught him by surprise. Yes, you're apologetic. Apologetic, eclectic, and meow. Is that how you are? Apologetic, eclectic, and meow? Sounds like a law firm. Oh, yes. If you've been injured in an accident, call trouble. If you've been injured in an accident, it might have been caused by trouble. Oh, yes. So many pets and so many chews. I choose you. What episode of The Simpsons is I choose you from? Or I'll make the question easier. This will be an easy question to answer if you don't know the answer to the first question. I'll give you a chance for anybody who just happens to know the answer to the first question before I give you the additional clue. The first question is, what episode of The Simpsons is I choose you from? And if you can't answer that question because you just don't know the answer, I'll ask you a question that even if you've not seen the episode, you might know the answer. To what holiday, or about what holiday is the episode of The Simpsons that says I choose you? Yes, Daddy knows, and Daddy loves. Nobody knows? That's very disappointing. I expected better of you. The holiday, for what holiday, or about what holiday, is the Simpsons episode featuring the expression I choose you? Yeah. Exactly. And spelled exactly like that as well. Can anybody guess? Valentine's Day is correct, Winston Spawn. Good guess. Ralph Wiggums wants Lisa Simpson to be his Valentine. And Lisa Simpson, because she's nice, gives him a Valentine because he didn't get any. And then he falls in love with her. And the Valentine that either she gives him or he gives her is, I choose you. The other person's Valentine. Does anybody know what the other person's Valentine is? I don't remember who gave which to whom, but the two Valentines exchanged by Lisa Simpson and Ralph Wiggums, one of them said, I choose you, and featured a choo-choo train. What do you think the other Valentine said? Who knows? Anybody? We'll find out shortly. You might be able to sort of intuit this as well. You don't necessarily have to have seen the episode. What do you think the other Valentine might have said? No, my B-Day is more relevant to Eric's current reference. Oh. Last night at open mic, a bro and I played Burn One Down, Ben Harper, Smoked Two Joints, Marley Sublime, and a mashup of Roadhouse, LA Woman, and Love Me Two Times. Always in on a high note. Yeah, well, the other Valentine said, be mine. And it featured a bee, a honeybee, you know. So that's the answer to the question. Well, was that Uncle Fatty? You said he played at the live stream. I mean, he played at open mic. So Uncle Fatty, what I will do is I will play the three song set I envision myself playing tonight. I'm pretty sure this will be, if I get 3 songs, I'm pretty sure this will be the 3 songs I play. I could change my mind and decide to play a different first song, but what I'm currently thinking, because I want to start with something that's got a bit of energy rather than something down tempo. I think the song that doesn't make the set is Satchel of Helpful Goods. And the other thing is, I'm going to need to either mic this or plug it in. I don't want to plug it in, but if I could turn it down low enough plugged in, it should be fine. I'm just not accustomed to playing it plugged in. You got to manage the sound a little differently, right? So maybe later when people are awake around here, I might practice these again on a few times plugged in, see how that works, you know? But anyway, for now, I'll just play it like this. Gerald has a thought. Gerald has a lot. Gerald has a plot to get the margarine tater tots. He's got a good idea for a name-changing business. Thinking now about what to call Christmas when they hire his firm to change their name. Gerald always thought there'd be chance enough to return to the work that's rough. He'd get back to it eventually, but his visions piled up and his plans would interrupt all the work that started off so hopefully. Now his mind is back on his business, thinking of changing factless to listless, so how all the people will shout his name. And knows he understands ever more clearly now. He won't provide explanation regarding the why or the how. He'll see you and know you inside of your heart. Exciting, delighting, Gerald plays his part. But Gerald still knew there's too much to do, and he had dropped time on me under review. Too much to rebut, so where now and what? Too much time spent nitpicking the skew with you. Gerald has a thought. Gerald has a lot. Gerald has a plot to get the margarine's tasty spots. He's got a good idea for a name-changing business. Thinking now about what to call Christmas when they hire his firm to change that name. Gerald has a thought. If I play it like that tonight, that'd be fine. I'm satisfied with that. The second song then I'd play is Cloudy Day in Los Angeles. It's a very cloudy day in Los Angeles, and today we run out of time. Struggles past, troubles still to come. The day is nearly done. Will someone buy us some more time? Cloudy day in Los Angeles. Cloudy day in LA. I'm just sort of evangelist, but I have something to say. Life can strangely be forgiving to those who stay awake all night. And mostly voices say to give in. They'll try to sap your will to fight. But whether I'm supposed to be here, or just be soon forgotten. Noise is sort of based on what I see here, and also on what I avoid. It's a very cloudy day in Los Angeles, and today we run out of time. Struggles past, troubles still to come. The day is nearly done. Will someone buy us some more time? Cloudy day in Los Angeles, cloudy day in LA. I'm no sort of evangelist, but I have something to say, something to say. Weird energy shifts today. Just joined. Welcome, and thank you for the weird energy shifts. Now, the last song I would play tonight, if I have 3 songs to play, is a cover of a Merle Haggard song. Some people might think the song's racist. It's not my song. I didn't write it. It's just a great song. So if you think it's racist, ignore that part. You might call me a rambling man, 'cause I do a lot of thumbing and a kicking canes, but it won't do an ounce of good to call me names. My belly wasn't Willie Woodrow. I wasn't born and raised in no ghetto, just a white boy looking for a place to do my thing. I'm gonna find me a wealthy woman in a line of work that don't take no diploma, 'cause I ain't got much to lose and lost the game. You might call me a good time fella, but I ain't no black and I ain't no yellow, just a white boy looking for a place to do my thing. I don't want no handout living, don't want any part of anything they give, and I'm proud and white and got a song to sing. Well, I said a few things and I'll admit it, if you want to get ahead, you gotta hump and get it, just a white boy looking for a place to do my thing. Small town boy, been around a little, and I like guitar and I like the fiddle, 'cause that's the kind of soul that can fan my flame. Blue-eyed Billy, feared and ready, I got to work just to be somebody, just a white boy looking for a place to do my thing. I don't want no handout living, don't want any part of anything they give, and I'm proud and white and got a song to sing. Well, I said a few things and I'll admit it, if you want to get ahead, you gotta hump and get it, just a white boy looking for a place to do my thing. Well, I said a few things and I'll admit it, if you want to get ahead, you gotta hump and get it, just a white boy looking for a place to do my thing. Well, I said a few things and I'll admit it, if you wanna get ahead, you gotta hump and get it, just a white boy looking for a place to do my thing. Thank you. That was me. Thank you for coming to the open mic tonight. My name was Eric. What do you think? Pretty good set, right? I think that set would kill, frankly. And the thing about that cover is, it does what I think sounded like Yes, the band. I don't know, are you talking about me or something else? I don't think Morrow's racist either. I'm just going to make the disclaimer about the song, because some people might think the song's racist, and my point is, I'm not in agreement with whatever message you might think the song has. I'm just saying it's a great song. It pops, you know. I want to clarify for an audience that whatever they think about the song's racistness or not, I'm not playing it because of what the lyrics say. Thanks, Uncle Fatty. Come On Feel the Noise might work live, similar to Twisted Sister, but a better song. Yeah, I mean, it's not a terrible song. I liked it a lot when I was a kid. Come on, feel the noise. Girls, rock your boys. Let's get wild, wild, wild. Hi, Hassan Lone. Were you saying that I sounded like Yes, the band? I have never, ever heard nor considered even possibility of being compared to the band Yes. That's this is a first for me. I don't even really know what the band Yes sounds like. I know the name. I probably know a couple of their songs, but I couldn't tell you what one of their songs was. It's a very interesting comparison. I appreciate that one. I don't know what to make of it. Maybe I have to listen to some Yes. Good day. I appreciate that greeting. I think maybe I should engage more good day in my talking to people. Were you referring to White Boy? A Yes song called Clap. We'll have to check it out. See what see what it sounds like. Record low, huh? See full forecast. Approximately an inch of snow is predicted for Saturday. So that's cool. I'm looking forward to that. That'll be nice. Small town boy, been around a little, and I like guitar and I like the fiddle, 'cause that's the kind of soul to fan my flame. Blue-eyed Billy, feared and ready, I gotta work just to be somebody's a white boy looking for a place to do my thing. I don't want no handout living, don't want any part of anything they're giving. I'm a proud of mine and got a song to sing. Today's high is 52. Is this above the average high? I'm gonna say no. I'm right. I get it right every time. I'm so good at guessing their weather question. So all of Saturday afternoon and evening tonight, it looks like we're getting wintry mix, as they call it. For us, wintry mix usually means snow, uh, because we're a little higher up than most of Mariposa. Despite separation, a change in just one will affect the other. That's quantum entanglement, yes. Yes, twin flames are lame. It's a terrible cult. That's why I recommend my alternative to it, which is called the split iceberg theory. And your goal in life is to become ice whole. When you and your partner are really meant to be together, you're a couple of ice holes. Okay? Merely send me $750 for a 45-minute session, and I will tell you what's wrong with you and what you need to do to fix it. You need to find your other half of your broken iceberg. My idea is completely different from twin flames because flames are hot, whereas ice is cold. Couldn't be any differenter. Beshert means inevitable or preordained. It can apply to any happening which appears to bear the fingerprints of divine providence, such as bumping into an old friend you were just thinking about. Which appears to bear the fingerprints of the divine, which you intuit like um, I guess you intuit intentionality Another way of saying that. Yeah, Rachel and I are ice holes, okay? If you want to be an ice hole like me and Rachel, you need to find your other ice half. What about soulmates? Do you think souls have codependency or something? Souls are very cold, like ice. That's why we each start off life with two souls huddling together for warmth and creating a single iceberg. But at birth, we're ripped apart from our other half of the iceberg, placed into two different bodies. Do ice holes produce poopsicles? Well, yeah, wait, I mean, sure, obviously, even people who are one enlightened in our ice wholeness, like me and Rachel, we still go poop. We're not superhuman in that regard. We still have buttholes, we still make poop. Um, I'm gonna make a poll right now, and we're gonna find out what people think. Okay? Do are there really such a thing as soulmates? I don't know how else to ask the question. I could ask it in a lot of different ways, but I'm going to just ask it like this: are there really such a thing as soulmates? This is the second poll I've ever done. Yesterday I did a poll: should I take you in the bathroom with me when I poo? And the winner was no. And like with yesterday, I will pick an arbitrary time to end the poll right now so that I can't cheat and end it how I want it to end. I don't care about this question at all, but 7 minutes from now, at 11 a.m., we will determine whether soulmates are really a thing or not. Soulmates exist. I had one, says Hero Lamb. You don't believe it until you find it. Well, I mean, I definitely feel like Rachel and I couldn't be more compatible, right? If compatibility links to soulmatehood, then it's certainly the case that Rachel and I are as soulmatey as possible. But whether or not that's really this, I guess what the question's asking is the term soulmate, does it comprise a qualitative or quantitative difference, right? So, so for example, I might be varying degrees of manly. I might have be more muscly, more hairy, more aggressive, or whatever, or less of those things. And that's a quantitative difference. But being a woman versus a man, that's a qualitative difference. So the idea of soulmates is that at a certain level of compatibility, you you are representing a different kind of thing than any relationship that doesn't have this unique matched pair thing going on, right? So that's really what the question is saying is, are soulmates a qualitative difference that we're making or a quantitative difference? I don't like woohoo. I mean, the thing is, it's not a matter of liking or not liking woohoo, right? When I'm asking the question of other people, uh, are soulmates really a thing? It doesn't mean I believe soulmates are a thing, right? Like, do I believe that Rachel and I are absolutely uniquely compatible? Uh, it's hard to imagine another person who's as typologically and enagrammically, but most importantly, and particularistly as compatible as I am. Compatible with me as Rachel is. Because INFJs normally aren't forced to exist in extended states of vulnerability with others. Rachel's history and mental illness and stuff forced her into a different kind of expression of self than a lot. She had to sort of come to terms with the fact that there were lots of perception battles that in her status quo she couldn't win, shouldn't even bother to fight. And for whatever reason, she responded to that by being relentlessly honest. It makes her kind of a very evolved INFJ in some ways. And it also, of course, makes her a very cautious INFJ. She's not especially demonstrative of extroversion in a lot of contexts, although she's pretty extroverted chatting with Ruben. Like, you can see they're both NFJs because they just they have that club kind of quality. Club mates like ENTP, INTP, uh, that kind of conversation is it's really easy conversation, right? You got an introverted and an extroverted version of the same thing. They fit together perfectly conversation wise. Does that make it the case that INFJs and ENFJs are soulmates? No, because that's there's that is that particularly easy communication that occurs between the extrovert and introvert of a given type um, is expressly easy for certain kinds of communication, and it does not necessarily, in fact, it kind of necessarily uh, doesn't express well as a romantic relationship because there's too much similarity between the people. Really, that's what it boils down to. Do golden pairs exist? No. I definitely don't believe that. Um, I don't believe that you can you can correctly say that a certain type, if you're with the right type, that you guys are going to get on fine. There are certainly different expressions, particular expressions of INFJ. Like right now, I can't really be friends with my friend Corey very well because he's been rendered into this shell of his former self, in which he's very defensive, kind of jealous, a little attacky with me, stuff like that. Makes it difficult to be friends with him. So let's say I were gay. Well, I would have a lot of trouble being in a relationship with him because at this point, because he's very toxic, right? That has nothing to do with his type, just has to do with his experience. Um, Coleman says I experienced what seemed like twin flames. I think Rachel's experienced what seems like twin flames as well. Coleman says she's messed my head up last 2 years. We need to get out of that relationship. If you're in a bad relationship where someone's messing up your head, you need to get out of it. Is what it boils down to. Don't try to fix it. You can't. You're not going to be able to fix it. There's no reason to fix it. You need to get into a good relationship. Eggshells. I sense Eric's FE on the radar. Eggshells. I don't feel like I'm walking on eggshells right now. Although we are, maybe you could argue that I'm making an effort for the conversation to be pleasant, but I think it's just sort of naturally occurring. I voted no. I believe some people are inherently more compatible than others, but I think it's a set of circumstances that forge a bond. That's very SI front stack, right? Like that you can't really be soulmates. You have to become soulmates through experience and shit. That's a reasonable and very SI perspective. Let's see. Instead of circumstances to forge a bond, as in dealing with their family together or you dating over your last relationship, stuff like that. Yeah, it's a good point you're making, Ke. It's very SI point. Um, I do think that something that was a big bond forger between me and Rachel was her psychotic break around Christmas, the first year we were together, where I had to make a clear choice. Like, do I really love this woman, or should I get out of this relationship because I've got the perfect excuse to if I want to? Nobody would object if I got out of this relationship. She had a psychotic break, squirted my dad's inside my dad's car with a hose and broke the garage door open, or a bunch of crazy shit. Went around the neighborhood and like tore out people's Christmas decorations. Got followed home by the police. It was crazy, right? And it is the case that it was the Corey vibe was off last time he was there. Well, I mean, he's in a fucked up situation. Um, so, uh, still haven't defined soul. Shaking my head. Well, I mean, the idea of soulmates isn't an idea that's reducibly, you know, uh, you say it's a statement that has no truth value. So I should have put yes, no, no truth value. But the thing is, what people mean by soulmates is I did define what they mean by soulmates, right? Is that it's qualitatively different in terms of relationship goodness than a good relationship between people who aren't soulmates. So do you believe there's a qualitative distinction there? Um, and or do you believe that some other person might fill the role as well? Would be the alternative to soulmates. So we have to find the term we need to define for the purpose of this question. We don't need to define soul because the definition of soulmates isn't predicated on soul, right? It's too bad you all haven't experienced romance in a real way, it seemingly. It's not explainable, only experience. Not sure what you people don't get about that. Well, in my experience with Rachel, in that moment I'm talking about, that very intense moment of reckoning for our relationship, like, was I going to view this as a relationship that needs to uphold my expectations for a relationship, in which case I would have left, right? But my experience of for a stretch of time thinking she wasn't at the hospital where I dropped her off, and I shouldn't have left her there in the first place. The panic of like the panicked fi harm prevention, this person mattering a ton to me for reasons unrelated to relationship stuff, just was like a 100-foot wave pounding me. It was like I understood at that moment she was very precious to me, that I didn't want to break up with her, that I loved her a lot, you know. And so we did go through a lot together at the beginning until we hired Dr. Ingram and he cured her, you know. It was crazy when she took that Prozac for the first time, just almost instantly. It's supposed to take a long time to get into your system, but it was within like 30 minutes of her taking it, it was like, bam. All of a sudden, I saw perfectly sane Rachel for the first time. It's crazy. And I never once regretted my decision to stay with her and eventually marry her, etc. She and I are perfect together. Now, the question then is, are we soulmates? Well, it's hard to imagine somebody else having the particular set of situations, consequences, realities, etc. I wanted somebody who was able to and willing to like move to California, or somebody close to me, you know, physically close to me, but I didn't want to be limited in terms of people to my geographic region. That's asking a lot to to ask to find a woman who's got little enough going on that she's willing to drop everything and move to California. And also is the problem that makes that happen is fixable and completely fixable. That's a rare set of circumstances, right? Quite a few guys say their wife is not their best friend, but a guy they grew up with is. That's an interesting point. Let me end this poll, okay? Because it's after 11. I just said it was going to be 11. In fact, people are split on the issue. 50% say yes, 50% say no. I'm going to ask another poll question now. Should your SO, significant other, be your best friend? Should your significant other be your best friend? Interesting question. Well, Carlos Paiva, I'm defining soulmate as um, non-replaceable, right? Like uniquely qualified for that role to the exclusion of other alternatives. Life partners, spouses, lovers, relationships are a covenant, a contract. The ones that have a sort of accountability buddy last longest and thrive when expectations are managed. Boundaries and consequences are on the table. Both hands are above the table, so to say. Communication is key. Quite a few guys. Well, I mean, the thing is, like, Rachel and I, despite being two extremely communicative oriented types, we don't have to communicate very much. That's part of the reason why we're soulmates. I can tell by just the slight pause before she responds that whatever I said is bullshit or Rachel's not down or whatever. You know, I can read the timing of things so clearly and easily. We don't have to communicate about much. We don't have much disagreement. It's as simple as, do you feel like going to this place or not? You know, well, of course we don't have a lot of challenging life circumstances to deal with at the moment. But even when we did, we didn't really have to communicate a great deal. We sort of understand each other in ways that uh, should is the key word here, money. You could say no on the grounds that the issue of friendship is not a prescriptive or normatively framed one. Like it's inappropriate. It's always wrong. It's a category error. You'd basically be saying the question's a category error, or the question relies on the category error. You could make that argument. Um, Significant others having the intuitive awareness is very special. Not all communication is verbal. Well, you got a point there, Uncle Patty. Just because uh, I'm understanding things without words doesn't mean we're not communicating. You make an excellent point there. I concede that point 100%. It's not the kind of communication that I think of as communication because it's more rooted in like sensory cues and knowledge rather than parsing and understanding. But that's fine. It still qualifies as communication. I agree. You meet, now you're in something together. INFJ may be prone to codependency due to a lack of subjectivity. Maybe. I don't know if codependency is a real term that means anything though. So you could say that Rachel and I are codependent. Uh, like sometimes I go to LA. I don't really. There's no real reason for me to go with Rachel. I could just go by myself, deal with the whole thing. But both Rachel and I feel uncomfortable when we're apart for very long. Does that mean we're codependent? I mean, I do it sometimes go down there without her, but In general, we're mostly connected at the hip. However, you'll note that like she's asleep, I'm live streaming. I don't need to wait for her to wake up before I start live streaming or something. I'm not sure what codependent means. In some sense, it seems like it just means you really love each other a lot. Is codependency horizontal? Oh, that's why you said that, Winston's mom. I misspelled horizontal. I didn't even notice that until right now. I did not notice that. Having that intuitive line between one another is a key component. You mean geographical or intimacy? Proximity is not necessarily physical, perpendicular, perhaps. If you want to be sociopathic about it and analyze it. I mean, that's not every kind of understanding that doesn't validate on the authenticity metric of FI is bad or sociopathic. I tend to agree with you here, Lamb, that when evaluating a question like whether someone's a soulmate, you ought to rely on your subjective epistemics, but not all of us have good subjective epistemics. Mine are better than Rachel's. I have SI front stack. I can I can necessarily do and basically only understand our relationship as KE's talking. Like, she said about you form bonds through experiences and stuff. I I understand our relationship is very solid and wonderful and reliable because it has been for a long time. And I my SI expects the status quo to continue. So Jeremiah is asking KE, how much does she think intimacy is dependent on physical proximity? I mean, I think it's more dependent than intuitives think. Like, or maybe not even intuitive, maybe everybody. People tend to overestimate the sustainability, desirability, acceptability of a long distance romance. I I've seen that work okay, and for example with Susie and Abraham, but it requires that there be a goal between the two people of changing that reality. It took Abraham and Susie a long time to actually live together because Susie's from Norway, Abraham's from Los Angeles. Abraham was ready to go, then COVID hit, and then they had to wait a couple years. He finally got there, and they finally got married, and that worked out fine. But I think they would tell you probably that yeah, physical proximity is hugely important for sustaining an intimate relationship, and that they suffered for lack of it for the entire duration of the time they didn't have that physical proximity. That means that's in that case, proximity is not necessary precondition for there to be genuine intimacy, but it's necessary that it be the goal and ultimately happen if that intimacy is going to be validated. Humping each other is beneficial for intimacy. Carlos Paiva, you are so about that. And that is exactly why I had sex with Rachel last night. I said, listen, Rachel, I need to do a little bit of intimacy benefit work. As part of my role as your husband, I need to make sure that we sustain the right level of intimacy. Thus, get ready for some dick. I don't think physical proximity is the bar you meet. Hey, I'm next to this person, therefore it's fine for me to have a relationship with them and they're my soulmate. I think that's obviously very dumb. What I'm saying is, if you truly are soulmates in any sense of the word, no matter how you mean it, even if you just mean like super good, super well matched, then the the goal should be to, if not live together, live very close to one another, Some people might prefer to live in separate homes, I guess. But if you're not making an effort to be in close proximity with one another on an ongoing basis, then you must not be that attached to each other. All the single ladies, if you want it, then you should have put a ring on it. If you want it, then you should have put a ring on it. Oh, 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 oh. That song's not that good. It's overrated, but it's okay. All right, it's 11:17. What time are we ending this chat? Should your spouse, significant other, be your best friend? My answer to the question is no, because I think I reserve the term best friend for somebody who's not a significant other. It's just like, functionally, obviously, Rachel's my best friend. I spend 95% of the time that I spend with another person, 99% of the time I spend with another person, I spend with Rachel. So if you were to evaluate on an SI level who my best friend is, it's indisputable that Rachel is. But from my perspective, the term best friend is reserved for another man that I'm not having sex with. So accordingly, I would say, no, Rachel's not my best friend. She's my wife. She fills that role, not best friend role, which is supposed to be another man that I'm not having sex with, because it's a different kind of relationship. Well, KE, let me tell you what kind of man to get. An INFJ. Try several of them if the first one doesn't work perfectly with you. You know, you can't just get an INFJ and feel like, there, I'm done. You have to get the right INFJ, okay? Don't just pick one at random. Romance versus romance, Carlos Paiva says, and it's a good point. This is my wife. This is my best friend, right? Note that my wife can't be my best friend because my wife has a period once a month, and my best friend does not. That's why my wife is red and my best friend is blue. All women need men in general. Well, that's ridiculous. I mean, in the broadest sense, we all need one another. Like, no woman would be happy if all men disappeared from the planet. Is a fair enough. No woman would be better off if all men disappeared from the planet. It's a fair enough thing to say. But that all women need men. I mean, obviously, lesbians don't need men. And even in general, if women, it's much easier for a woman to get a fake man, namely a dildo, than it is for a man to get a fake woman. Of course, men can kind of hump anything, you know. Give me a cantaloupe, it's fine. Maybe, I don't know, an eggplant. You think you could fuck an eggplant? Who here wants to fuck an eggplant? Anybody? Because I've got an eggplant over here. And if you want to fuck it, you can have it, because I hate eggplant. Please don't give it back to me when you're done, though. I've had the biggest heartbreaks from people that barely graduated high school. I mean, you don't think people have to be smart? Is that what you're saying? You're the opposite of a sapiosexual. I don't believe in that. That I don't believe in. People like, I'm attracted to smartness. Bullshit. Bullshit. Nobody's attracted to smartness. If smartness is distinct from sexuality. Like, it's like saying, I'm attracted to how fast he types. Nobody finds that a turn on, you know, like, oh, he types so fast. He uses so many big words, I'm getting wet. No woman ever says that. Women need men because they build the world. I mean, women also build the world. Is there some portion of the world to be built that women can't build, but only men can build? I can't really think of anything. I mean, unless you're talking about man seed. Men can build man seed. They build it in their testicles and then they distribute it out of their man seed distribution tube. Lou, says humans need humans, of course. We need to work together regardless of sex or gender. Yeah. What I think is that people need to stop saying things like women need men. But you know what? I think those people need that, but they clearly don't think they need that, or else they wouldn't say such things. So, I'll tell you what we all need: air. It's one thing we all share in common. Everybody here needs air. If you don't have any air, you're going to start struggling in life. And pretty soon, your life will be over. A lot of society is just a continuous chain of standing on the shoulders of previous giants. I agree with you, Bunny. True. Because human civilization, the metaphysical parts of humanity, they do evolve, unlike the physical parts of a species, which do not. Humans are distinct from all other animals in that our culture or civilization, our knowledge base, who we are as a species, abstractly evolves. So, the average intelligence is 100, but the average score keeps going up, right? So they have to renorm the test for IQ. Society is dependent on the existence of Cone Man 3 specifically. Well, I mean, Carlos, by the way, all the evolutionary forces are working against change. So deviation from the genomic mean at a certain deviation point results in death of the individual. So the evolutionary forces work against the genome changing. Even when there are changes that are nearly neutral, there's no good reason to presume they link to reproductive success at all. So, for a variety of reasons, I don't want to argue evolution right now, if you don't mind. I'd rather not. But certainly we note that changes in genomes represent a weakening or sickening of a species genomically, and not some sort of move towards changing into a different species for reasons unclear or undefined. I don't want to argue about evolution. I mean, I've reviewed it a lot, Carlos, by the way. I just reviewed it the other day when I was listing the various explanations of evolution that contradict each other and asking people which one they affirmed. What I discovered in doing all that reading is that it's a jumbled mess of lack of any kind of clear anything. The problem with evolution, the number one problem with evolution is this: it doesn't make any predictions that we can test that don't falsify. It makes predictions, but when we test them, they falsify. I mean, presumably, these random genetic mutations are either more or less well suited for changing environmental conditions. But if that's the real thing that's driving the whole thing, then it can't possibly be the same engine of change for fruit flies who have an incredibly tiny generational length and this tree that's 5,000 years old, right? So that tree lived for 5,000 years. There's a tree they recently discovered somewhere, they say is 5,000 years old. The point is, there's no conceivable reality in which environmental changes can be factored in to reproductive success when your generation, when you live for 5,000 years, right? That can be the same mechanism for something that lives for a day or two. It's got to be a different mechanism, because environmental changes happen on a single scale, but reproduction and species generation length vary on totally different scales. So you can't have the same engine of change for both, predicated on being successfully responsive to environmental change. It's just, I mean, that's a pretty damning point I just made. Like you really, if you think about it, that basically destroys evolution right there. What I just said. But the important thing to remember is that the number one reason we don't agree with evolution is because it fails to meet its burden to affirm. Here I am spending a lot of time trying to negate it, right? But instead, the problem is, my main point is evolution does not explain where species come from in any way that makes any sense to me. I'm trying to understand it, and I'm not a dumb person, right? I'm also very much loath to be on the wrong side of something. So when I say evolution doesn't meet its burden to affirm, I'm giving you the professional opinion of somebody who has years of experience and training and specialization in evaluating cases being made to determine whether they meet their burden to affirm or not. And I can tell you, I have no subjective interest in this whatsoever. It doesn't matter to me whether evolution is right or wrong. I would love an explanation. When I tell you evolution fails to meet its burden to affirm, I am not lying to you, okay? I could, in theory, be wrong, but I've never encountered anybody who can explain it to me adequately to convince me that evolution does meet its burden to affirm. If it were a real science theory, it would make predictions we can test. Its prediction that it makes is reproductive selectivity results in changed species. But when we maximally push that vector as hard as we can, we discover it doesn't create new species. Dogs stay dogs. They may look very different from each other, but they stay dogs. They can still mate with one another. They can still produce reproductively viable offspring. And we impose selection pressure vastly greater and vastly more focused than anything we can conceive of happening because of environmental changes, naturally in response to, again, random mutations. So David Berlinski has a good analogy. If you imagine taking a book that's 300 pages long that you write that's, I don't know, about snow, and then randomly change words from it over the course of thousands of years at a certain rate, it will never become a different book saying a different thing, right? It'll just become gobbledygook. I think Coneman said we are God's creation. Well, that's not an explanation either, you know. For that to be the explanation, it would have to be falsifiable, and that's not possible when talking about God because of reasons I articulate elsewhere. So we need an actual explanation, not just Magic Sky Friend made us one day. That's not a good explanation. I may be a Christian, I may believe in Magic Sky Friend, but I also believe that explanations should explain things. Otherwise, they're not explanations. So, a good thinker affirms the following statement: we don't know how species came to be. We have no adequate explanation for it. That's what a good thinker does. Of course, if we were to poll the world almost nobody would choose that option. Everybody would choose either evolution or creation. Maybe 0.001% of the population at best would choose. We have no good explanation for where species come from. I mean, I guess that would be true if you ask the question as a short answer question. Do we know, or do we have, or what is your explanation for species? If we ask the question, what is your explanation for where species came from? What explanation do you believe regarding where species came from? Only a teeniest fraction of people would say, we don't have a good explanation for it. Nobody knows. The smallest, very smallest fraction would answer that short answer that way. And we could use that as essentially a test to see who's really paying attention. Who's really paying attention? Because I used to be an evolutionist without really understanding it at all. I believed in Darwinian sexual selection because I hadn't thought about it very much. I didn't look into it at all. There was some occasion some years back where I sort of realized that I didn't understand it. Like, wait a second, how does that work? And I tried to research so I could understand it better and just discovered that it's completely bullshit, I didn't go out seeking to discover that it was bullshit. I was seeking to have an explanation. So I'm going to end this poll now. And yes appears to be the winner of this question. Should your significant other be your best friend? Yes, says people in the poll. Oh, somebody said that, right? No, rejecting evolution isn't an embrace of knowing nothing. It's an acceptance of whatever the reality is. So I believe we have an explanation for escape velocity, how it is that rockets can leave the atmosphere and go into space. I believe we have an explanation for that, right? And the reason is because I know what the explanation is, more or less. It makes sense. It validates when you check it with reason. I expect all explanations to meet that basic standard to be qualified as an explanation. So, in other words, I believe that the statements I make should be correct. And the correct statement about where species come from is we don't have a good explanation for that. We don't have any theory or whatever that actually explains anything. Because the good thing about theories is we know how to validate those. They make predictions that we can test, and then they either validate or falsify. The problem evolution has is the predictions it makes keep getting falsified, and so the evolutionists keep changing the meaning of what evolution is, and it doesn't mean anything accordingly. It's like there are multiple competing theories for what evolution even is. Oh, Ivar said that. Sorry, Conan. I thought that was you because I was looking at the phone and his little circle, when it's really small, and my bad eyes look kind of the same. So my mistake, Conan. I'm sorry I attributed that to you. I was wrong. Heard a headline about how studies on the mutations now. We are decades out, but not sure if anything conclusive has been determined yet. Well, see, that's the thing, though, Carlos Pay. Like, yes, we can selectively breed breeds of dogs, right? They remain the same species because we define species as able to produce a reproductively viable offspring, okay? Remember, the question we're asking is, where do species come from? And how did they get there, right? The existing explanation is we started with a smaller number of species, and those species, groups of those species, broke off into separate populations. That in one of those populations, various random mutations resulted in the genome of this population being selectively shaped such that it differed so much from this population's genome that it became a different species, right? That's the existing evolutionary theory. So when I'm asking where did species come from then, when we talk about dogs, we'll point out that even though
we've applied more selective reproductive pressure on these individuals of this species than nature could ever possibly induce, right? We still can't create a different species. So what that tells us is yes, there's variation within a genome, and yes, you can individually variate, express different phenotypes of the same genotype so dramatically by breeding that you can have things like Chihuahuas and Great Danes. But the key thing to note is you cannot change the genotype, right? So, and the other thing to note is if all the people were to disappear and all the dogs were set loose, they would they would return to a genomic mean. The Chihuahuas would die, the Great Danes would die, and you'd eventually end up with back a medium dog. That's how evolutionary pressures work. They work against change, not towards it, right? So we have to acknowledge that, and then we say, okay, so we don't have an explanation for where species came from, and dogs are an example of why we don't, because we've tested the idea with dogs and proved that we cannot speciate them no matter how hard we try. And we can apply the mechanism purported in evolution without the randomness, right? So we can select purposefully with intent, and we still can't speciate. And we can't speciate no matter how short the generation length is, whether it's fruit flies, dogs, or giant trees. So we remember that, and then we understand that we don't have an explanation that makes any sense. Yeah, I did close the poll. Only meaningful changes are made to the book? Okay, well, I don't know what that means. I am forgetting about the hunter-gatherers, yeah. All right, so here's what you see when something's completely bullshit. Like, for example, perfect spheres of the heavens. With perfect spheres of the heavens, they were being driven by this dogmatic notion that God made only perfect spheres in the heavens. They had whatever they were affirming had to validate under that frame of reference. And so what you saw was initial theories getting more and more complicated, more and more involved to try to sustain this dogmatic frame that was fundamentally false. You see the same thing in evolution, as Winston Baum points out. Evolution is no longer considered linearly. They now use the idea of a tree with many branches. Okay, so they've changed metaphors. That's not. This is what happens when shit's bullshit. The theory doesn't falsify, yet it still stays as the name of something, right? It doesn't validate, it falsifies, but they just change what it means then. Like, can you imagine any other theory getting away from that in science? It's ridiculous. Have there been any simulations that assign an unlimited time budget and mutation delta that at least prove some potential viability? I don't think so. And the thing is, another way we know, like, here's another thing that again falsifies evolution. Evolutionists can't come up with a genetic clock. How long it takes for meow to change into meow. It's impossible for them to do so. In other words, you can't give them two sets of genomes and have them determine, well, this one occurred this far back in time, this one further back in time, because it's a more primitive manifestation of this one. They've been trying to make a genetic clock, but they are unable to do so. Because why? Because their idea is bullshit, of course. Well, it depends on what the thing is, right? Coneman 3. So evolution says, people who affirm evolution say, I have an explanation for where species come from that's scientific, which is to say it validates, it makes predictions that validate. It has a clear mechanism that's clearly defined, and we can test it in isolation in order, certain aspects of it in isolation, to validate or falsify it. That's what evolutionists say evolution is. We remember, we start with what people are saying, because somebody's saying something. They're affirming something, they're negating something. I mean, logically, if you took any object and played atom Jenga, then you could arrive at any other object, which might be proof for evolution possibly working in some best case. Uh, I mean, I think money that with evolution, we can artificially create something that is the best possible case. In other words, intentional, willful beings breeding something to maximally differentiate isolated populations of that species. That's the best case scenario. Now you say if we gave us millions of years to continue breeding dogs into different breeds, well, what we continue to hit are these hard barriers where the differentiation is so not conducive to life that the differentiated individuals die. You end up with species that have terrible health problems because they've been bred for certain things that aren't conducive to being successful at living. The proof is weak. It's like getting a person to live for one day and then saying humans might be immortal. Right. Well, I mean, we know we can change. Man has such a predilection for systems and abstract deduction that he's ready to distort the truth intentionally. He's ready to ignore the evidence of his senses only to justify his logic. I mean, people have an incredible predilection to be wrong in many different ways. So the thing to remember is, um, I'm going to be wrong mostly about subjectivities. And if somebody is of the Walt Whitman school, like, do I contradict myself? So I contradict myself. I am large. I contain multitudes. If somebody's values are aligned accordingly, or their tool function particularly is like where it's going to occur, then they're going to frame what's wrong with the world as failing to adhere to their tool function. But because they don't understand cognitive functions, they don't get that they're just projecting their frame of reference. So I might say what's wrong with the world is that people use language so poorly. I am projecting my frame of reference fundamentally because what I'm saying is, as I move through the world, I encounter pushback against my way of doing things, my fundamental way of doing things. And that causes me a great deal of frustration. I interpret problems that emerge in the world through the frame of people using words poorly accordingly. But the difference between me and everybody else in history is I'm you might call a black belt in philosophy. Like, I'm a master level philosopher as qualified and as capable as Kant or whoever else, right? But I'm informed by cognitive functions. And that gives me an insurmountable advantage. You could say I'm Jung plus Kant minus Dostoevsky. Like, Kant did a great job of explaining TINE as a way to validate something as moral or not, right? He really did a lot of work there. But at the end of the day, he provided a normative framework that potentially that does work as a normative framework. You can use it to validate the legitimacy of an action before it's taken. And that's what's necessary for a real normative framework, right? Because if you're using utilitarianism, then you can't actually know whether a given action you're considering taking is moral or not until you measure the outcomes. You try to split the difference with something like rule consequentialism, but it's at that point you get so far divorced from how anybody actually makes moral decisions, it becomes absurd, right? And most of all, what it is saying you need to understand morality through reason rather than through intuition and or feeling. But the reality is we only can axiomatically determine the moral status of something at the base level. We can do moral reasoning fine, but it is necessarily going to begin with something axiomatic that we intuitively agree upholds the conscience and can't qualify as being morally legitimate. We have to begin with something like that. Kant pretends that we don't need to, that we can begin with a moral imperative that one can infer from some observation and apply that moral imperative, and anything that violates that moral imperative represents something that's illegitimate. The moral imperative can be framed in a couple of different ways. The way I prefer it framed is one ought not treat another agent as a means to an end. In other words, if you're not considering the equal agency of another person, you're using them in some way without that consideration, that comprises an illegitimate expression of agency. But he overcomplicates things a great deal and accomplishes very little in doing so, because ultimately we can't know that which is wicked, morally impermissible, without an axiomatic example to start with. Like slavery is always wrong. Maiming toddlers is always bad. Something like that. What you got planned for the weekend? They're going to maim some toddlers, That's an interesting activity. In order to avoid this fundamental reality of moral reasoning, myriad philosophers have attempted to construct bullshit notions of a priori knowledge, etc., without recognizing that fundamentally what we're running into is a barrier between that which is communicatively viable, communicatively validatable, and that which we have to accept as true by our intuition and feelings. We can't use reducible logic beyond a certain point regarding this issue, because fundamentally it's not predicated on our reason and logic, right? It's predicated on things more authentic than that. Shared subjectivities. And common shared subjectivities does not comprise a universality at all. It's instead of being universally so that we each have these subjectivities, it's that we can agree on something that is communicable because we each have these subjectivities. Only communicable things ultimately are universalizable. But one point I want to just make sure gets stressed here is that I'm not opposed to a theory or an explanation. I don't prefer agnosticism. I prefer to be correct about things. So if we don't have an explanation, then I prefer that that's my position, because that's the correct position. I just want to, again, reinforce the claim that I somehow prefer not having an explanation is completely not true. I'd much prefer having an explanation. But I don't so prefer having an explanation, and I'm going to pretend something that doesn't explain anything explains things. It's got to, I'm not a dumb person. I can understand an explanation that explains things. I do a lot of negationary work on evolution, but really, if I were smart or something, I'd just say, look, I don't need to do any work here. Evolution's the one making the claim they have an explanation. Let them explain it. Lar. I put cutlets out for the woodland friends. It's cool in the snow over there. You can see all the little squirrel paw prints. Snow is great for seeing prints, for tracks of animals, you know. Like last year we saw these big ass bobcat tracks, maybe in a mountain lion for all I know, on the driveway over there. Let's see what we see over here now. I think those are footprints, yeah. Ruben and Acacia went out and played in the snow last night, so here are their footprints. The only other tracks I've seen this morning have been squirrel prints, but I haven't looked back here. I could look down the hill and see if there are any prints down the hill. I don't see any. There's some squirrels. Always plenty of squirrels around. I never have a shortage of squirrels. And there's no prints on this snow. Like, no animal. Maybe there's a couple of squirrel prints. But basically no animal walked on this snow. So, cool. All right, then. Let's go inside. It's pretty chilly out there. I don't have any socks on. Which makes me say, Burr, motherfuckers, Burr, I'm cold like Aaron Burr was when he shot Alexander Hamilton. In case you weren't here for a previous discussion, I learned that Aaron Burr shot Alexander Hamilton from a Got Milk commercial. It was on a long time ago. It was like a quiz show in the commercial, and the question was, who shot Alexander Hamilton? The person they called on the landline to answer the question had his mouth full of peanut butter. And he didn't have any milk. And so he was trying to say Aaron Burr, but his mouth was full of peanut butter. And they couldn't understand him. And he wasn't able to win the quiz, and therefore it ended with got milk. And that's where I learned that Aaron Burr shot Alexander Hamilton. If it hadn't been for that Got Milk commercial, I wouldn't be able to share this fact with you today. Anyway, if you want to be cool when it's cold outside, you say, it's very Aaron Burr today. You could also say, I feel like Alexander Hamilton on his deathbed. People say, what do you mean? I mean, it's Aaron Burr. And people say, that's a terrible joke. And then you'll say, I know. That was my goal, okay? I tried to make a terrible joke. Therefore, I succeeded instead of failed. It's fun to succeed instead of fail. Ah, good. I've only taken 1.5 of these today. I wasn't sure if I had taken the second half or not. I haven't, so I'm going to get to enjoy that right now. I could wait a little bit, but we're closing in on the afternoon now. We open mics at like 6 o'clock. I think it's fine. If I feel like a need for it, I might. I might take another half. I've already watched you eat plenty. Yes, I've never seen Shawshank Redemption. Carlos Paeva's answer relies upon evolution, which I've already falsified. Get busy living or get busy dying. Can I choose to just be in between? How about I choose to be in a coma? Or I choose to live my life as a comma, always representing a place where people take a breath. So the thing is, just because I can always express myself in a frame where what I'm saying validates within the frame I'm setting and understands and explains where things are correctly interpreted with subjective things, intuition, reducible logic, etc., doesn't mean I think everything's reducible. Yes, everything I'm saying you can validate because of the way I'm phrasing things carefully. But what I'm explicitly not saying that everything ought to be validated with logic. Just that you can rely on the fact that what I'm saying validates logically, rationally, with reason, or I won't say it. So, since I don't have an explanation for species, I don't say I do. If I had an explanation for species, I'd be able to explain it to you. That's what it means to understand something. If you truly understand something, with reason, you can explain it to others. And I'm not dumb. If you can't explain it to me so I understand it, then you can't explain it to me. And that means you don't understand it, and there's no reason for you to affirm it accordingly. Why do you have to eat so much, Kitty? I've already watched you eat. You act like we're starving here or something. Anyway, if you want to hear a different voice than mine convey some reasons why evolution is bullshit, check out David Berlinski. He's an NTP, a very smart guy, a mathematician, and he takes a much more math perspective on the thing and points out how, there's a lot of math with population demographics, and if you're talking about, genetic drift, which is another alternate theory that purports to explain evolution, even though it competes directly with other theories and doesn't seem to care that you can't permute them, then there's certain math involved, right? And the shit is, all these ideas, they just don't validate mathematically. So David Berlinski, if you're a serious thinker, you might find his arguments against evolution more compelling than mine. Because I don't bring a lot of math into the analysis of things. I don't really feel it's necessary because, there's a problem immediately created by our definition of species and our understanding and observations of the world. We've never seen any two members of a species give birth to anything but another member of that species, and we define species accordingly. So the idea that the species can somehow change into a different species runs afoul of everything we've ever observed and our definition of species. So, it's the whole idea of evolution is predicated on a fundamentally wrong notion and ought to be scrapped, but there are too many people with their careers tied up in the whole nonsense. And, it's easy enough to blur in with genetics. That's where the evolutionists go. They go, well, look, we can create these changes genetically. We can show that there are variations within the genome. We can exploit those variations. We can find things that we can attribute to mutations that occurred at some point without really having any evidence of that, etc. That kind of thing. And then they just try to get so deep in the trees of their specific thing that they're talking about that they are able to ignore the fact that the forest is bullshit. I'm a black belt who's never publicly sparred with another black belt. I mean, there aren't very many of us out there, that boy Klaus. I have sparred with another black belt when I used to do practice rounds against what's his name? What is his name? The Peninsula coach, Scott Wheeler. Scott Wheeler is another black belt. I will tell you, well, I call him a brown belt. He's a black belt in debate, but at best a brown belt in philosophy. As an ESTJ, he's NI-polar, but he's still a kick-ass debater. And the reason he's a kick-ass debater is he has cataloged basically every debate argument he's ever made from high school through coaching. And every debate argument he's encountered that somebody else has made that he can grab the shit for. He's got it all organized and cataloged, and he can run anything, anytime, anywhere, right? So I didn't necessarily win debates against him because I'm not so well prepared, but I'm so clever that even though he's cataloged every argument he's ever heard, I can come up with shit he's never encountered before. So it was an interesting battle between TE and SI versus NE and TI. There might still be on the channel also a round in which Kimball and I demoed a round. Denise Kimball was an INTP, and she and I would go at it. She was state champion of California. She's a black belt in debate for sure. Philosophy, well, she might be a black belt, but I don't think she's engaged actually much in philosophizing like I am. My position is denial can't be offended. Not taking a position is okay. Is there an area you'd like to learn more about, Eric, for philosophical reasoning purposes? I mean, what I read about randomly that teaches me stuff is usually math and physics stuff. So I tend to read articles about quantum physics. I read articles about when some mathematicians solved this conjecture that's gone unsolved for a long time. I'll read articles about conjectures that remain unsolved. I read astrophysics articles sometimes. That kind of stuff I don't have the skill set to do meaningful work in. Like I don't have the background in math that you need to do to understand everything. I like reading those articles because they challenge me. I don't necessarily understand everything. Some concepts I'll be introduced to that I have to then Google and look up and read more about. That's why I read those things, is because it's stuff I don't know already. Other kind of articles I read articles about my favorite sports teams. USC, I'll read articles about. Right now I'm reading an article about Washington because I'm really rooting for them to win the national championship. What kind of other articles do I read? Sometimes I get sucked in by dumbass psychology titles like eight signs that you've realized your potential or something, like shit like that. I never like those articles. I just skim them real quick and close them out. But what do I want to learn about? I don't have a specific area that I'd like to learn more about. I learn all the time as I move through the world because I don't read things for confirmation bias. Oh, I've been reading about this Epstein documents. I read about that yesterday. Here's an article that interests me. Terramore yet to file paperwork. There's this huge movement against Terramore making an RV park in our county here. And so I'm curious about how that's playing out. I read articles about crypto. Crypto platform accused of blowing up Bitcoin, SEC. Securities and Exchange Commission. So I clicked that one. I want to read that one. NASA spacecraft takes new images of Jupiter's volcanic moon. I might want to click that, except it's a New York Times article, and I can't get behind their paywall, I could click this thing that says view all the stories about that, but I'm not that interested, so I'm going to leave that one unclicked. I'm kind of curious about this home at Tyreek Hill had his house caught on fire. I'm curious about that. I've read already about Aaron Rodgers, Jimmy Kimmel thing. which sounds like Aaron Rodgers is totally in the wrong. And I had a discussion with Rachel Rubin and Acacia yesterday about how Kimmel's denial is how you do a denial that anybody should believe. He expressly denied every specific thing that might constitute engagement with this stuff, right? In no uncertain terms, no mushy words at all. He didn't say something like, it's not true. He said, I have never meow, 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 meow. A bunch of specific, really hardcore things. Absolutely false, blah, blah, blah. That's how I believe that denial, you know? Here's an article on different ETFs registering to trade in like stock version of Bitcoin, basically. Al Jazeera has an article that says, I don't care who wins the U.S. presidential election. Then I push for you at the bottom of Google News. Hive Mapper price jumps 100% instantly after Coinbase listing. This is why I'm telling my daughter and everybody else here, buy Meme Combat now. As soon as it lists, it's going to at least double. Here's some articles on the Huskies. The Seattle Times has an article that says, don't underestimate the Huskies. The Athletic has an article saying Washington has spent its season of destiny dancing with late game disaster. That's kind of interesting. I've been reading articles about the resignation of Claudine Gay, the Harvard president, and I read idiocy, unbelievable idiocy, like that this is an attack by the conservatives on the left or something. How is expecting the president of Harvard to not be guilty of plagiarism? How does that comprise an attack by conservatives on liberals? It's ridiculous. And then LeBron James's kid, Bronny, starting to find his groove, scores 10 against Cal. I read articles about this, but I've already read it because I like USC. There's been another mass shooting in Perry, Iowa. And here's an article that says, parent recounts phone call from son during Perry High School shooting. I think I'll click that one. That's interesting enough. Supermarket giant boycotts Pepsi and Lay's over price increases. That's interesting. Oh, Carrefour. Carrefour is a supermarket I went to when I lived in Shanghai. Everyone made the same joke about photo of Lane Kiffin's girlfriend. I'm interested in this because they're 21 years apart. My relationship is 14 years apart. So I kind of identify with age gap people. But although mine's not, 21 years. Lane Kiffin needed to have the same rule I had when I looked for a girlfriend in my 40s. Don't date anybody under 30. Because you'll be subject to too much FE shit. Now here's the sort of article I sometimes click. Harvard psychologist, if you say yes to any of these 9 questions, you're more emotionally secure than most. Okay. All right, clickbaity bullshit. Let's see what you have to say. I'll click that one. Can you listen to different perspectives you disagree with? Yes, I certainly am able to listen to different perspectives I disagree with. However, it says here, instead of going to battle, there's a flexible, empathetic, non-judgmental exploration of another's reality, even during times of conflict and disagreement. Well, I mean, I certainly engage in that, but it's also the case that because I can properly frame perspectives being stated as either expressions of self or whatever, that I can do better than that. I can differentiate between circumstances in which I should listen and those in which I should respond and how I should respond, etc. Can you set healthy boundaries? Yes. Can you admit when you're wrong? Yes. Do you know your core values and beliefs? Yes. Can you express negative emotions respectfully? Sure. Yeah, I think so. Can you take criticism from others? Yes. I take it all the time. Do you continually strive to change and grow? Strive is too strong of a verb there. I am, on a frame level, affirm the desirability of doing so. Can you stop yourself from reacting impulsively? Not necessarily. Do you trust that you'll be okay no matter what challenges come your way? More or less. Yeah, more or less. So, okay, I'm doing pretty good according to that Harvard psychologist, Dr. Courtney S. Warren. Everyone made the same joke about Lane Kiffin's girlfriends, which is final score 38 to 25. Final score or age gap? Actually, their age gap is more than 13 years. It's 48 to 21 years. I figured it out. It was 48 and 27, I think. Andrea Tunnick first heard the news of a shooter at Perry High School when her son called her while he was running out the back door. Aiden called me from school as he was running out the back door saying, there's a shooter at the school. I'm running out the door and I find there's a shooter at school, Andrea Tunnick said. Her son is an 8th grader at Perry Middle School. It was at school for an early morning basketball practice. Aiden and his friends were eating breakfast in the middle school lunchroom when they heard the gunshots, though they didn't realize what they were. One of his friends literally said, who's beating on the table? Then they figured out what was going on. Andrea Tunnick said, Aiden said the lunchroom lady started yelling, you've got to go, and then they ran out of the back doors. One of their friends lives in the neighborhood and they sheltered there before moving to the National Guard Armory. Other students were evacuated to nearby Perry Lutheran homes. Multiple people were shot. It could have been much worse. The school had been in session. The suspect died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Andrea Tunnick says she wasn't sure what to make of Aiden's call. It's bonkers. It's a very unnerving phone call to get. That phone call, I bet it is. I bet that's an unnerving phone call. Well, at least you're aware that your kid's fine at the moment, they're on the phone with you. Washington has spent a season of Destiny dancing with disaster, but Huskies remain unfazed. Michael Penix Jr. Meow, 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 meow. Michael Penix with every Washington fan watching that game-winning field goal. They show him burying his head, not being able to watch it. Washington plays in tight games and wins them. In fact, 8 of the Huskies' last 10 wins have been decided by 8 points or less. The other 2 were by 9 and 10 points. The Huskies haven't blown the doors off anybody since putting up 59 points against Cal in late September. Ever since then, it's been a weekly double date with destiny and anxiety. Yeah, I know. The Huskies are a great team. I love the way they win despite, I've reached my limit, huh? Okay, Seattle Times, then I don't want to read your article. Tyreek Hill's house caught on fire. Apparently, it was an accident. The blaze was started by a child playing in a bedroom with a cigarette lighter. It was an accidental fire. Hill was at practice at the time of the incident, and upon learning of the event, left the team facility. Everyone at the residence was able to get out of the house and was safe. Hill could later be seen arriving on the scene and watching crews work on getting the situation under control. That's a big fire. It's a fucking mansion too, but it's a big fire. The Florida mansion, it was a mansion. It's 9,300 square feet. So that's more than 4 times as big as my house. It's less than 5 times as big, but that's a huge. Who needs 9? I mean, you can say who needs 2 people need 2,100 square feet, but seriously, who needs 9,300 square feet? It's a lot of house. You pretty much have to get a cleaning lady. Crypto platform accused of blowing up Bitcoin. As the crypto community braces for the SEC decision on the Bitcoin ETF, Max Seaport sits at the center of a storm over his prediction, suggesting a regulatory rebuff that contradicts the bullish sentiment flooding social platforms. So yeah, the prices dropped wildly, but I bought at the bottom of it, so probably my Cardano's up now. Let me see. I bought it yesterday for 500 at the bottom of the dip, and it is now worth 510.87. So I made 2% on my investment so far. Congratulations, Eric. I should have also bought Bitcoin when it dropped, but I might as well just go down to the same difference, really. Terry has filed paperwork. I do have an online subscription, Mariposa Gazette. Stop pretending I don't. Let's see. I don't see the article. Let's see, news. Tara Moore yet to file paperwork. County officials unsure when it might happen. The pre-application, which was submitted in December 2021, so they haven't filed paperwork yet. I learned everything I needed to from the title. Familiar faces from the Epstein documents, but no bombshells. Among the familiar faces are former presidents Donald Trump and Bill Clinton, Britain's Prince Andrew, New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson, French modeling scout Jean-Luc Brunel, American investor Glenn Dubin, Leslie Wexler, the CEO of L Brands, all of whom have denied any wrongdoing. Trump has previously said that while he and Epstein spent time together in the 1990s, Trump later banned Epstein from Mar-a-Lago and severed ties, though he declined to discuss details publicly. Mysteries remain. Giuffre's deposition included reference to the three people who still have been publicly identified. She alleged she was ordered to have sexual relations with an unnamed prince, the owner of a large hotel chain, and another unidentified person. At least two John Does have filed appeals with the court to keep their names under seal. Judge Loretta Prescott granted one Doe an extension to submit evidence supporting their claim, and the other's appeal remains under review. Wow, I wonder who those people are. So those are the things that I read about. In this case, there wasn't much astrophysics, quantum mechanics, or anything like that. That's how I read things these days. If, in fact, the New York Times bestseller, 22 Proportions of Cock. I'm a Pac-12 guy, but Pac-12 is evolving after this year. I hope Pac-12 goes out with a bang, winning the national championship, When you put out an artistic work or song, do you think it becomes the audience's after that, in that you can't decide how they react, and each has its own connection to the song, put through their own life lens? Yeah, I think so, Hero Lamb. I recognize and respect the fact that once I put out some piece of art, particularly a song, but that whether or not, I don't know really yet how good it is, whether or not it's good, and that I can generally rely more on how people react and respond to it in general to determine its quality level than I can necessarily trust my own feelings about it, depending on what it is. Some things I like more than are good, but I try to be correct about things, and generally it'll validate one way or the other. I don't like the laws of power at all. I think it's bullshit. 9 ways your bread is deceiving you. Now that is an article I would definitely click, Money. That sounds like an article I want to read right now. Finance is S-I-T-E. I mean, finance is T-E. It manifests in different types. You can get plenty of ESTPs, I'm sure, as entrepreneurs. But as Winston's mom says, one understanding of TE is that it's business logic. I was talking with some MILF about food a week ago, told her processed food tastes shitty, or she shared that she looked up recipe for homemade bread, etc. Cooked it. I made bread myself too. Uh, said it was night and day, a big difference. But here's the problem with homemade bread here, Lamb. It doesn't have any preservatives in it. So it like gets stale like after one day. It's ridiculous. You have to eat the whole loaf in a day. SE hits you, SI sues you. I mean, SE hits you, TI sues you, or FI. I mean, like, Michelle Schock sued me for FI reasons, or attempted to sue me for FI reasons. But if she had been smart, she would have made sure her lawsuit TI validated, or else it wasn't going to fly, right? I have a lot of paranormal stuff I could tell you. Throughout my late teens and 20s, I was super into it, even investigated some places. Really? That's cool. Here I am. Are you still in your 20s? Tell us about it, Caroline. What's some strange, unexplained stuff? I love paranormal stuff. Is Michael Penix better than Caleb Williams? My column. I would say, obviously this year he's been better. Who would you draft is really the question. Would you draft Penix or Williams? They're both coming out this year, so you can make bread pudding in your casserole or croutons from stale bread. I tend to just throw it away. My woodland friends like sunflower seeds. They don't necessarily seem to like bread very much. I don't know why. Some things require spiritual practice. It's better to have the experiences than just to read about them. Oh, that's true. I promise not to scam you. I mean, the thing is, watching that game against Texas and seeing Penix just drop dime after dime on way downfield throws, I gotta say he's the best downfield throw pocket passer I've seen in a long time. He puts it just right in their hands, just exactly where it has to be, 60 yards down the field. That's pretty impressive. And he's a lefty too, which means his passes always look weird, but it's like you're like just watching and you think he doesn't look like a very great quarterback. He looks kind of small and his passes come out looking weird, but that's even among professional quarterbacks and stuff. That level of precision at that length of pass is not a commonplace phenomenon. Because you might be able to successfully get a pass downfield to your receiver. The question is, do you hit them in stride, right? Like with cornerbacks all around him and stuff. Penix is amazing at that. You see the ball leave his hand, you're like, no way that's going to be a pass completion. Of course, he's got at least two top level receivers in Polk and Adunze, which obviously helps a lot. And he's got other great receivers on that team too. That offense is stacked and designed for big play passing offense. They've got a pass protection offensive line, and they run off the pass rather than pass off the run. They'll get a few good running plays out of Dillon because the defense has to prevent that kind of big play explosiveness, and that opens up the running game of it. But they're not very good not very good run blocking team. the offensive line. Even they got offensive line of the year, right? They're not an especially good run blocking team, but they give up very few sacks. Michigan's defense is for real. Can Michigan's defense disrupt Penix the way they did? What's his name? Milroe or something like that? Alabama's quarterback. Because Michigan got into the Alabama backfield. The defensive front of Michigan did quite a bit during that game. So I believe Michigan's defense can be disruptive. But I do believe this as well. That Michigan's defense is going to have to force a turnover or two to win that game. Because I don't have a lot of faith in Michigan's offense. And Washington's defense is a good example of bend, don't break, that's done successfully. Like, they're not great at stopping the run. They're not great at stopping the pass. They're not great at anything, really. But they do enough given their offense. If Washington can avoid turnovers, I think Washington is going to win the game. Well, I think sort of overall, they're probably a better team because their defense is so much better and than Washington's. But the problem with making your hay on defense is defense is like conservation efforts. The loggers only have to win once. Then the question's moot, right? That's the problem with making your hay on defense, especially against a big play team like Washington. Washington's not looking to grind away at your defense anyway, so I think that puts them kind of at a structural disadvantage. I do believe Washington will probably score more points against. Michigan will probably score more points against Washington than they did against Alabama. But you want to talk about an offense that's not explosive. It doesn't need to be explosive in the Big Ten, really. Like, look at who finished second in the Big Ten. Iowa finished second, 10-3, and they just got stomped by Tennessee. Yeah, I think they scored 2 points, maybe. I saw an article yesterday I read about how Caitlin Clark, on her game-winning three, outscored the entire Iowa football team during their game. So they either scored 0 or 2 points. I'm not sure which. They may have gotten a safety late in the game. When I turned it off or stopped watching it, stopped paying attention to it, Tennessee was up like 21-0. So one nice thing about talking about sports is I'm pretty well informed about it. I like talking about it. I have opinions about it. And when people disagree, it doesn't matter, right? It's like we're just chatting about sports. The Michigan group has also been together a while, a lot of seniors. Well, I think both teams benefit from coaching stability. Washington's had that coach for a couple of years now, but his whole staff has stayed together the whole time. He hasn't lost any assistants. And that DeBoer guy, Washington's coach, I think his record, he's lost in all of his head coaching career fewer than 10 games. He started at like his alma mater, which is some little school like South Dakota State or something that, I don't know, played Division III. Yeah, assistants are huge and underrated. Although Nick Saban seems to be able to replace him at will with the right guy. He must have a great instinct for who to hire, He's the one who gave Sarkisian a shot after Sarkisian got fired for being drunk on the job. And now Sarkisian is the head coach of Texas. They made the college football playoff, etc. And when they interviewed Sarkisian, like between quarters or halftime or whatever, I was pleased to say that he was very much not drunk. He obviously still doesn't drink. Well, I had this horrible thing happen to me with my college bowl pick'em thing on ESPN. I did one of my pick'ems weighted. Like you can do it standard or weighted. In the weighted one, you put your most confident choice at like 46 points, and your least confident choice is worth 1 point. So on that pick, I got 25 and 17 on both picks, the standard and the confidence one, right? But on the confidence one, the ones I were most confident about, my number one most confident, which is 43 points for the win, was Oregon over Liberty. Oregon did stomp Liberty 45-6. I was right about that. But then my second most confident one was San Jose State over Coastal Carolina, because I really believed in San Jose State's offense, and they lost. Then the third most confident one was Utah over Northwestern. Utah lost. Fourth most confident, SMU over Boston College. SMU lost. And fifth most confident, Miami over Rutgers. All of those I lost. So four of my top five ones were 42, 41, 40, and 39 points respectively I got wrong. So even though I did well kind of overall, like on my other pick here, host Eric's pick 1, I have the same record, 25 and 17, but I'm in the 90th percentile, whereas I'm only in the 75th percentile on my confidence one. The last game I picked Washington over Michigan. I picked both of these correct. I picked Michigan over Alabama, and I picked Washington over Texas. And now in the championship game, I've got Washington over Michigan. How many points will be scored in the college football playoff national championship game? I put 74. So you're looking at, say, 38-36. Could be 40-34. Do you remember when Arkansas coach Bobby Petrino got into a motorcycle accident with his side chick and then had to do a press conference in the next press? I don't remember the press conference, but I do remember the row over Bobby Petrino's side chick. Okay, so according to Show Media purchased for me as a gift, me and Rachel, he purchased the Mad Magazine board game. And supposedly it's coming in the mail today. So if it does come in the mail today, then later on, before we go to I don't know who's going with it, but before we go to the open mic, I would like for Ruben, Acacia, Rachel, and Eric to play Mad Magazine board game on live stream. So I'm going to end this live stream now with the intention expressed to do that at some point later this afternoon. Assuming it does arrive today, and prematurely offer my thanks to Show Media for sending us that game. That sounds like fun. Talk to you later. Don't forget to eat plenty of cheese.